Good morning. Oh, come on. Did you have the coffee out there? Good morning. Awesome. Welcome. My name is Michael Kaiser, and I'm the president and CEO of Defending Digital Campaigns. And we're really excited to be here, not only in Georgia, but at Google, to talk about campaign cybersecurity and protecting high-risk users. I just want to tell you a little bit about DDC so you understand some of the context here and what we're trying to do in Georgia. We have a really amazing lineup of speakers today. It's really incredible, and we're really excited about all the information that we have to share. DDC was founded back in 2019 following some mischief that happened in 2016, as many of you may know about, in the presidential campaign. And some people got together, they did some work at Harvard, and they came up with this idea that campaigns should have better cybersecurity. And they realized that campaigns should have better cybersecurity, but they probably aren't going to pay for it. And this group of august folks, which included former presidential campaign managers on the left and on the right, because we are bipartisan and non-aligned, as well as some former government officials from the NSA and DHS, went to the Federal Election Commission and said, hey, look, campaigns got to have cybersecurity, but they're not going to pay for it. We should be able to give it to them for free. It's a national security issue, really. And the FEC took a little back and forth, but they eventually agreed. And they allowed us to be stood up as a nonprofit organization that accepts donations of cybersecurity products from organizations like Google and some of the other ones you'll hear from today, Yubico and Valamail. Give those to federal campaigns, state, House, Senate races, presidential races, the national committees. They can accept those donations from us, and they don't need to report them as contributions to the campaign. which really kind of greases the skids and allows people to adopt cybersecurity very quickly, very easily. And so that's what we do, and we help them onboard it. We have an onboarding team that helps people get this products up and running. We focus on very simple things. But the big news is that we're coming to Georgia, right? So we went to your elections commission and made the same argument, right? That it should be allowed, that campaigns in Georgia should be allowed to accept free cybersecurity products. And your election commission agreed, and so here we are. Ready to serve the people of Georgia, to protect the democracy in Georgia, to protect the marketplace of ideas, which is what campaigns are, right? It's where our democracy starts when someone stands up and says, I want to run for office. This is what I want to do for my community. These are the policies I want to put in place. We need to protect that part of our democracy as much as any other part. And we're here to do that in Georgia, so we're really excited about that. I want to give a huge, huge thank you to Google. I mean, we're not just here for this wonderful, beautiful space, which is kind of amazing in and of itself, but Google's been a supporter of ours since day one. They fund us, they give away free security keys, they give us intellectual ideas about how to do things. We collaborate with them. Collaboration, you'll hear about that today a lot when it comes to cybersecurity. Collaboration is the key to cybersecurity. It's not only what everybody does to protect themselves, it's how all of us work together across this ecosystem to make what we do more secure. And Google leads the way in the work that we do, but you'll hear from some other our partners as well today. I want to thank the civics team out there. Raise your hand. Erica, Dainara, William, others. I don't know. They're probably all running around. Yeah. Let me tell you, a little blood, sweat, and tears went into all this, and so we really, really appreciate that. A couple of just quick housekeeping notes. One, there is Wi-Fi here. You don't need a password. It's alphabet guest. If you need your parking validated, do it at the registration. And this is going to be, like, there's no breaks today. Like, you know, there might be a little break in between. They move some chairs and stuff, but we're going to be run right through this program from the beginning to the end. It's all going to be so compelling that you're not going to want to get up anyway. Correct? Right? So we'll leave it there. I think I've covered everything I needed to cover. And now I actually get the honor to introduce Mayor Rusty Paul from Sandy Springs, Georgia. This is always a challenge from someone who comes out of state, because the assumption is most of you from around here, you probably already know this man at some level. So it's hard for me to introduce him, but I know he is the third term mayor in Rusty Springs. I also know that he is originally one of the youngest elected officials ever in the state of Georgia. I think I saw that. And he also worked in the George H.W. Bush administration, doing some pretty important stuff, including some disaster response. I think it was Hugo and the earthquake in San Francisco. So, you know, has been involved at the federal level, obviously very involved in the state level, and clearly extremely committed to the people and residents of Georgia. So, Mayor Paul, thank you.
Thank you. I was so glad he didn't read my resume, because if you heard it, you would think I couldn't hold the job. I'm in my third term. This is the longest I've ever held a job. So I'm delighted to be here with you. I'm a little bit as the mayor of Sandy Springs, I'm not used to welcoming people to the city of Atlanta. You know, but I will try and channel Andre Dickens and welcome you to the city of Atlanta today. My background, believe it or not, is before I went to the dark side and became a candidate, actually managed campaigns. And I'll talk a little bit about that as I go through. I'm glad to be at today's cybersecurity summit hosted by Google and Defending Digital Campaigns. It's great to see so many cybersecurity experts and government officials and staff and campaign practitioners and industry leaders here today. As I said, I did my master's work in political science with a concentration on campaigns and elections, and I've run campaigns at the state and local level, been involved in every presidential campaign since Reagan in 1980. Clearly, I've campaigned for myself, and of course, just like the lawyer who represents himself has a fool for a client, a campaign manager who manages his own campaign has a losing candidate on his hands. So I have studiously avoided trying to be the candidate and campaign manager throughout my 47 years in elective office. I was one of the youngest at one time. Now I'm about the oldest one left in elective office, other than I did run my first campaign. That's before I knew better. I put a picture of my 11-month-old daughter on my brochure saying, this is why I want to be on the city council, to give this wonderful young 11-month-old girl a wonderful place to grow up. And I won in a landslide. 2 years later, I put my picture on and won by 5 votes. Lesson learned. But I'm going to talk a little bit about campaigns and tactics and kind of what you're interested in. But I'm going to come at today's conversation more from the point of an elected official dealing with a broad range of cyber challenges. And let you know what I'm seeing as the mayor of a city of 110,000 people just to the north of where we're sitting today, and working on the board of directors with the Georgia Municipal Association U.S. Conference of Mayors. Local government is under assault like never before. The threat is hacking. I don't have to tell you that. And hacking is not new. In fact, hacking has been around as long as technology. In fact, one of the first technological hacks happened in 1903 during a public demonstration of Marconi's theoretically secure wireless technology. A magician and inventor hacked the demonstration and started sending obscene messages in Morse code through the auditorium's projector. And then a group of Polish cryptologists broke the German Enigma machine in the 1930s, the machine that the Germans used to transmit codes. And then Alan Turing, the father of modern-day computing, headed a British team to further hack German war communications and give the Allies a clear look at Germany's plans, military orders, and tactics. The biggest problem, in fact, became that they had so much information that they couldn't use because they didn't want to tip the Germans off that they actually had hacked the system. The first time the word hack ever was used in a technological sense was in 1955. At MIT, the minutes of an April 1955 meeting of the Tech Model Railroad Club at MIT state that Mr. Eccles requests that anyone working or hacking on the electrical system please turn the power off so you don't blow the fuses. And then also in the 1950s, a blind 7-year-old boy who had perfect pitch discovered that whistling the fourth E above middle C, which happens to be a frequency of 2600 hertz, would interfere with AT&T's automated telephone system, thereby opening the door to free long-distance calls. So hacking's been going on as long as somebody's been around to try and figure out. Even back in the day when people used invisible ink, you could hold it up to a candle and it would reveal its secrets. So hacking's been around for a long, long, long time. A resurgence recently in ransomware attacks have really focused on attacking local governments because the hackers believe that local government is the weakest link in the chain. And several cities and counties have had to deal with it. Dallas spent months recovering from a recent attack that hindered the city's 911 emergency services, court systems, and other services. Oakland continues to struggle with a 2023 hack with ransomware. A ransomware gang published sensitive data from a hack they got from Lowell, Massachusetts during a recent breach. And both Atlanta and Fulton County right here have been locked out by ransomware, and both are recovering from the breaches. Fulton County just this week, after 3 weeks, was able to start collecting taxes again. And opponents of if you're from here, you know the big controversy about the Atlanta police training facility, so-called Cop City, and they have taken down the police department's websites on a number of occasions. In Chicago, not too long ago, a group hacked the police radios to play NWA's F the Police. Now that one was kind of cute. I got to applaud their creativity, but you see kind of what we're facing at the local level, and local governments have varying levels of IT sophistication when it comes to these challenges. Hackers are looking, as I said, for the weakest link in the communications chains, and when it comes to local governments, when you've been hacked, then comes the real dilemma, to pay or not to pay. Can you trust the thieves that steal your stuff to return it if you pay the ransom? Clearly, you're dealing with people who have a problem with right and wrong. Can you rely on people with a morality deficit to unlock the files if you pay? Plus, governments have legal barriers to simply sending several $100,000 in Bitcoin to an untraceable account. It's not allowed under generally accepted accounting principles for local government, and it really doesn't look good in your next audit. Most simply choose to restore their systems the best way they can and do a better job next time of backing up the systems. But that, of course, does nothing to protect the terabytes of personal data that we possess on our employees, our citizens, our police, and first responders, which is a real problem in the era of doxing. I had to think by appearing here today, am I making my city a target? Truth is, though, we are already a target. We, along with every local government, are just one employee opening a phishing email away from succumbing ourselves. So why do they target local governments? Well, it's kind of like Willie Sutton, the old bank robber, was asked, why do you rob banks? He said, that's where they keep the money. Not only are local governments a source of money, but we are a gateway to a wider world of valuable data. Our police are connected to dozens of state and federal public safety and defense networks. Our financial systems interact with the Department of Revenue in the state of Georgia, as well as the federal Treasury system. Our public works engages with the U.S. Department of Transportation and the State Department of Transportation. So foreign governments see us as the weak pathway to the larger systems they want to hack. My son oversaw data security for a major corporation here in Atlanta for several years, and he told me, he said, I know exactly when the Russians and the Chinese go to lunch. Everything calms down a little bit. Now the Iranians are involved, and all kinds of other players are out there trying to hack our systems. And further, these foreign actors are working to influence the outcome of our elections and to undermine our faith and confidence in the pillars of our democratic society. A lot of what we see on social media this year will not be legitimate campaign communications, but foreign countries sowing dissent and confusion among everybody. And the problem is if you see it, there used to be a saying, if it's in a newspaper, it's got to be true. We have adapted that saying now to social media, and those of us in the technology world know that that is far from truth, that you can't really rely on it. Now we're entering a brand new world of technology, the advent of artificial intelligence, whether it's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and other emerging systems. They hold great promise for new ways of accomplishing old tasks, but they also have the potential to complicate our ability to defend our systems and to often know what is real and what is not. I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors South by Southwest last week, and they took a recording of one of the speakers, and then they had the audience say, what do you want him to say? And they would make up things, and within less than 15 seconds, his voice said all of the things that the people in the audience, and you couldn't tell whether it was him or made up. That's what we're going to be entering into in this era of campaigns, where we've always had to work with disinformation during the course of a campaign. But in today's world with artificial intelligence, whether it's photographs, voice, all kinds of different things that we're going to be hearing and seeing during the course of campaigns, and we're going to have a really tough time, if we as professionals have a tough time discerning whether it's real or made up. Just think about the average voter who lacks that sophistication. And so we've got a real challenge on our hands as we go forward as professionals, either in the public policy realm or in the campaign management realm. In fact, there are real other challenges out there to our constitutional rights. Wall Street Journal last week had an article showing that law enforcement now can go to commercial databases and buy the information on us that they used to have a search warrant to get. So that's creating all kinds of new challenges for our legal system. Nevertheless, the issue of cybersecurity is one that is way too often overlooked, but it's critically important to our economy, our campaigns and candidates. And the Atlanta metropolitan area is a tech-rich environment full of innovation, And Georgia is a state full of big ideas and entrepreneurial startups and successful businesses. You represent that community. This innovation makes Georgia a top target for cyber criminals. As I said, Atlanta and Fulton County just recently, who seek to profit off of cyber attacks and sow chaos and discord. Cybersecurity is one of the most critical issues facing our nation and the world, in our increasingly digitized world, where most people rely on technology to get through the day. Can you imagine if we lost the internet today? We'd be lost. We wouldn't know what to do. I couldn't get to work. I use GPS to find my way there every day because of different traffic tie-ups around this area. We've seen Fortune 500 businesses that have faced significant attacks, and almost everyone knows someone who's been hacked. I had just a little 2 or 3 person business. We got hacked several years ago. Fortunately, I backed up most of my stuff, and rather than deal with them, I just spent a day rebooting and reloading. Our entire 21st century ecosystem, the tech, the finance sector, our education and medical systems, all industries, everything we ever do every day. You get in your car. I came down here today in a car with more technology in it than my office 10 years ago. Our world is totally tied to technology, and that's a great benefit until some nefarious character suddenly decides to end it all. And then we're lost. But more importantly, the front lines of our democracy are rapidly changing, and we must adapt to prevent cyber threats by first securing the backbone of our democracy. Those of us who raise our hand to run for office, we give up the privileges that are offered to the average public. We're used to that. We're used to that. We know that we are going to be the subject of conversation and criticism. But what we're not used to is, and we're used to getting lied about, by the way, and that's nothing new either. But with all these new tools and all this new technology, those of us in the public arena are going to be battered and bashed and attacked in new and novel ways. And those of you who are in the campaign sphere, those of you who are in the public policy sphere, all of you have to be prepared how to deal with this changing environment that we're facing today. From training elected officials and candidates and campaign teams on cybersecurity and the best practices to enrolling campaigns, the commercials right here. I mean, I am sponsored by Google today. Enrolling campaigns in Google's Advanced Protective Program and equipping elected officials and campaign teams with the security keys. Groups like Defending Digital Campaigns are rolling up their sleeves and taking tangible steps to secure our democracy. We have been that. I worked for Ronald Reagan in the 80s. I know that ages me a lot. Some of you probably weren't even born when Ronald Reagan was president. But he talked about this country being a city on a hill, a light to the rest of the world. And that has always been our aspiration. We have never lived up to our aspirations. But I think we at least get up every day trying to do it. And those of us in the public sphere as elected officials, those of you who manage campaigns and run campaigns, we're facing threats that we've never faced before. And we have to be prepared how to adapt, to be flexible, and adjust. So I want to thank you for being part of this discussion today, and thank you very much for allowing me to be your opening speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you. I think you've set the tone really beautifully for us here. So, Mayor Paul.
You're quite welcome. Today. Well, so there's some remarks up here if anybody wants to use them later.
Great. And just one little note before we get on to the next thing. There are media in the room, just so you know that there is a media here. Oh, thank you, Erica. That's the star of the show right there, Erica. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Lori Richardson, who's the VP of Trust and Safety at Google. Come on up.
I didn't mean to make such a dramatic intro.
Be as dramatic as you want. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, everybody.
Great. So we're going to talk a lot about artificial intelligence in elections. It's been a hot topic, and we'll hopefully answer some questions that people want to know about. But first, tell us a little bit about like, what does the VP of Google Trust and Safety do? What's your job at Google?
Well, I have to start by saying that I was born in Macon, Georgia, and raised in Macon, and so I'm a Georgia person, and it's really great to be back in my home state. I rarely actually get to do things in my professional capacity here, but it's a true joy to be here. So I'm at Google, and I lead our trust and safety team. Are we good with the mic? And this is a team that's been around from the beginning of Google in different forms. And it started as a team that helped ensure that when you were clicking on those 10 blue links when you Google something, that you weren't seeing spam. It was a web spam team. And over time, this team has had to develop and expand its capabilities to protect users from all kinds of threats and to make sure that whatever surface you're using at Google, whether it's Google Search, Google Ads, YouTube, Google Play, and now our new generative AI products, that you can rely on the information that you're seeing, that you understand and can make a decision for yourself, whether it's trustworthy or not. And so we do everything from child safety to, we still do fraud, spam, and classic forms of abuse, but we also think about broad and more systemic threats to platforms like cybersecurity and misinfo and disinfo and all different kinds of ways that people try to manipulate information online. It is fascinating work. It is always changing. We both help ensure that our products are designed safely so that users really understand how to protect themselves when they're online. And we'll talk more about that. And we defend our platforms broadly against an array of threats.
Great. So just a small portfolio?
Yes. Very relaxing job.
There's been a lot of noise about AI, right? Obviously, the potential of deepfakes. I mean, the mayor just talked about it in his remarks as well, and other uses of generative AI and having a negative impact on the upcoming elections. And, we just did a survey with Yubico. We asked registered voters, were they concerned about impersonation of candidates or inauthentic content? And 78% of them were concerned about it in the upcoming election. So it's not just, something that's being talked about behind the scenes. Clearly the word is out on the street. And people I think it's actually a good thing that they're thinking about it, quite frankly. But when you look at that landscape, when you look at sort of the technology that's emerging and, where we're at, like right this moment, because we are on a path here, I don't think everything's fully baked, right? Where are your concerns? What are you most concerned about in this particular, in the next, as we look ahead towards election day, right, which is only 300 days, less than 300 days away, I guess.
And for us, we do work on global elections. So it's always election day somewhere in the world. So we're thinking a lot about the upcoming Indian elections. The EU has elections this year. We just got through Russia elections, which of course are very different than some of the other elections that we work on. So let me describe at a high level how we think about our election work and then get into the question that we really want to focus on here, which is around AI and how it's changing things, both for better and in ways that are in many ways increasing sort of the threats to online platforms. Our election work at Google focuses on three main pillars. First, we want to make sure that the information you're seeing online is reliable and trustworthy. So wherever you are around the world, if you want to figure out where to vote and how to vote, we want to make sure that if you go to Google search and ask that question, you can rely on what you see. That's so important. I mean, a lot of focus in the context of elections and online platforms focuses on sort of single instances of disinformation, which is important too. But the most important thing we can do at Google is make sure that we're giving information broadly to voters that they can rely on. And the second way that we work on elections and try to protect democracy overall is that we work with organizations like your excellent organization and many others to help equip the highest risk users with protection and security. And so we do that by distributing security keys. We do that through programs like the Advanced Protection Program. We do that through programs like Project Shield that campaigns can use to defend against DDoS attacks and local governments as well. And we see that as a really important part of our commitment to a safe overall ecosystem and to our own platforms. And third, we obviously try to set rules of the road for our own platforms that are easy to follow and easy to understand, but that help ensure that information that you see online can be trusted. So we do that by building in tools like about this image. So if you see an image on Google search, you can click on it and understand where it's coming from. We have built in disclosures to our election ads. YouTube is rolling out new labels for synthetic media that may have been altered using AI tools. And so we have a whole set of approaches to making sure that our platforms are safe and reliable broadly. This election is so interesting, this election year, because it's a huge election year, which I know we've already talked about in reference. It matters so much all around the world. And we are seeing these new tools come online, Gen AI tools, that are making certain traditional forms of manipulating media much more accessible and creating sort of volume opportunities for bad actors. And so one of the things that we're thinking about at Google is, and I know that other platforms are as well, is we're not necessarily, when you think about what is AI, this new, of course AI has been with us for a long time, first of all. Google products have relied on AI to help organize, making sure that you have the most relevant search results for a really long time. The difference with this year is that the interface of AI is just much more accessible to the average person, because the big advancement is that you can use natural language, not code, to access it. And that means that non-technical people like me actually can just type in a sentence and a phrase, and really magical things can happen. And we really believe in this potential and the opportunity for massive advancements in science, in medicine, in so many fields. And we recognize that, like with all forms of technology, AI can be abused. But when we think about AI abuse, we're mostly talking about less novel challenges and sort of new forms of abuse that we've never seen before on our platform, and much more the opportunity to create more access to forms of abuse like fraud and spam and deception at massive scale. And so when we think about how to protect our platforms, we have to start with that mindset.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's really interesting and helps us sort of get a frame into some of these things. And you mentioned this, that 2024 is not just an election in the U.S., right? And in fact, some are calling it the election year. I think there's 64 countries, 49% of the world's population is voting this year, right? So that's well beyond the United States. And in fact, the United States, 66 of the 89 legislatures are up for election. In cybersecurity, we call that the attack surface when you're dealing with campaigns, right? That's what we think of as like, that's what we're trying to protect, right, at DDC. So all these elections, many of these elections are happening before us in November. And I just wonder if you've seen, a lot of people have talked about this. I don't know if you've seen any of this. A lot of people have talked about what you see happening in these other countries is what we should be getting ready for here. So have you seen anything out there across, the globe that's like, oh, that could be imported to the United States, or likely to be imported, especially if it worked? Somebody tested something and it worked. What you're seeing out there.
I think the good news is it's what we're seeing so far is the same bag of tricks that we've seen previously. And so we're seeing people that try to get access to campaign and election officials' emails and perpetrate attacks through that vector. We're seeing coordinated cross-border disinformation campaign attempts. And we're seeing some attempts to use new tools of Gen AI to create deceptive forms of information. We have to be mindful that that understanding these risks means being responsible about what they are and what they aren't. Because one big risk when it comes to AI and elections is that the public just broadly loses trust in what they see online, whether they should trust it or not. And that's why we're taking such a layered approach at Google to trying to make sure that we're really empowering end users to understand what they're seeing and whether they can trust it online. We haven't seen so far something that has majorly disrupted an election that we've been tracking closely, but we do take learnings from every cycle all around the world, because you do see bad actors learn from each other. There are global networks. And so we're sort of learning as we go. And we also have learnings from previous US cycles, 2016, 2018, all the last years. And 2022 was an interesting one for us in that I think we were on heightened alert for for broad risks that we had seen before, but it was overall, actually, when it comes to major threat vectors, a fairly quiet cycle. We're not resting on that for 2024. It's a much different environment here, but we're always taking these learnings and applying them forward.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think what the point that you're raising about trust, right? I can't help but think a little bit about the fact that may be the goal of some of the bad actors,
exactly.
right? So we sometimes think, they want people to vote for me instead of you, right? But creating that atmosphere of distrust generally could be the goal.
Yeah.
Right, and I think we just all have to really be aware of that. I think we sometimes get forced into these kind of, silos about what some of the stuff can and can't do, and we have to remember always, like, what's an outcome that a bad actor is looking for, right?
That's
And
right.
distrust, I think, would be one of them, and I think that's really an interesting way to think of it, right? That might be what they're up to. So, we do, those of us that deal in cybersecurity, often talk about the sky falling, we're always, some of us try to fight against the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that often comes with, thinking about the things that, might or could happen, as opposed to things, as you're pointing out, like in 2020, we thought might happen, but maybe didn't happen. But we don't often talk about in this enough about how the promise of AI can impact, especially from our perspective as campaigns, of course. And there'll be some further discussion of this later on today. But campaigns are small. They have one goal: winning. They have they have a calendar that's a date certain. What are some of the ways that you can see AI being a positive in this campaign cycle?
Well, first of all, I think AI can be a tool that helps everyone with productivity and scale. So campaigns can think about ways to use large language models, whether you want to use Google Gemini or someone else's product, to put prompts in and actually help create, a better approach to running your campaign, to create more accessible ways of communicating your key messages. So there's lots of ways that I think just the basic availability of AI tools are going to change the way campaigns run. For us at Google, we think a little more from a platform risk perspective about the possibilities of AI in helping the defenders against attacks. And so one thing that AI is making available to us in whole new ways is that when we see a new form of novel abuse, whether that's a new form of fraud or scams that people are trying to perpetrate through our platforms or some other kind of abuse, we can now train what we call a classifier, which is a specialized tool to scan broad parts of the internet and try to find specific threats and harms. It used to take us several months to be able to train a classifier that would very precisely target that kind of harm and help us find it. It now takes a day. That is a massive leap. I've only been the leader of trust and safety for 2 years and a quarter, and that's a game changer for us, even in my time in this job. And we're only beginning to learn how to harness that. So just the basic capability of being able to understand what's happening broadly across the internet and synthesize it so that we can do our jobs better, I think holds massive potential for people who have jobs like mine and basic cybersecurity defenders. And also we can spot vulnerabilities in code. There are lots of ways that we can just all do our jobs slightly better because of AI. So I think campaigns can do that at the local level, and the platforms can do that at a very broad scaled level. And when you put those two things together, there's a lot of potential. You may have other examples, though, of the way that campaigns can actually use for security purposes, use AI.
Yeah, well, I was thinking even non-security purposes too. The campaign's small, they have limited resources. Everybody's like, AI is going to solve, going to help people do things better. Whether it's like, I think the examples we've seen are things like drafting emails, fundraising emails and stuff like that, take enormous amounts of staff time. And I think that's, we always want to balance the positive, right, with the risk. We have this technology mostly for positive things,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
So yeah. And so, we want to make sure that people understand, because sometimes we just get caught in that, kind of doom loop, right?
I agree. And I don't know if all of you have gotten in there and tried to experiment with it, but it's worth doing. Like sometimes if I'm writing an email to a family member, I'm like, hey, can you make this sound less passive aggressive? And it really works. So there are lots of different ways that you can put it to work for yourself. And I think we really have to break through the doom loop of how we talk about it, how we think about it, by empowering ourselves to really learn how to use it, what it can do and what it can't do. And then when you see information online, you're more likely to question the source and to make sure you can validate it and to avail yourself of the tools that the platforms should all be making available to you to do that, and to understand the potential for it too.
So given that you give one example of how you do it, just if anybody hasn't even tried it, what would you tell them? Like, how would they get started? Like, just what do they do? So
I mean, you can Google Gemini and find our Gemini app. I'm sure there's a direct link, but someone knows it. Maybe Nick does. Do you know it? Yeah. How do you get immediately to Gemini? And just start having a conversation. Ask some questions. See what it knows and what it doesn't know. And we should all become prompt engineers. That's all going to be a whole new category, a whole new skill of how do I ask the right kind of question to see really what these large language models are capable of. And you can contrast it to an experience on a platform like Google Search. I will say that we really want users to understand what the difference is between something like a chatbot and something like Google Search. If you go to Google Search and you ask for information, you're immediately taken to what Google determines are the 10 most authoritative sources based on a lot of user feedback over time. What the algorithm says, all right, here's the sources that you can most trust for that information. We try to respond to the user intent that way. If you're working with a large language model, you'll get a paragraph that really synthesizes that information in a different way. And for some purposes, that's super useful, especially for productivity uses. Can you translate this into a different language? Can you make this sound better? Can you help me think about the top 10 places I want to take my 5 and 3-year-old to in San Diego? All of those queries are the types of things you might want to use Gen AI for. But when it comes to really traditional forms of things like where to vote, how to vote, we want people to still rely on Google Search for those types of queries, because we want you to be able to understand exactly where the information is coming from, and we want to make sure it's state of the art and up to date. So we really do try to distinguish between those platforms.
Yeah, which I think just indicates that we all play a role in the filtering, not just AI itself. We have the filter up here too, right? That we have to be using whenever we do any of these things. So I've been working in cybersecurity a long time, and everything I've ever done in cybersecurity has been about collaboration, right? I was at the National Cybersecurity Alliance, the folks that bring you Cybersecurity Awareness Month, right? We're always working with industry, with government, understanding that the protection of the internet is not really fall down to one entity, not one company, not one government agency, not one country, right? Not anyone is solely responsible for this, and we have to work in collaboration to protect it, and that's what we do at DDC as well. We're like a neutral third party working collaboratively with companies and political parties and campaigns themselves to get them more secure. So I think AI is no different. It's going to require a lot of collaboration. And last month at the Munich Security Conference, Google, along with 19 other companies, made a commitment to combat deceptive content online around the 2024 election. So I wonder if you could talk about both why Google would join something like that and what you hope to accomplish through that.
Thanks for that question. And I think you start with a premise that's really important, which is that cybersecurity depends on multiple different kinds of actors working collaboratively in a high trust way to be able to share information, to share tooling and best practices. It takes the private sector, it takes governments, it takes nonprofits, it takes research and universities. Like, all of these folks have to work together to make sure that we can stay ahead of new and emerging threats. And building on that, I've seen in very short period of time, companies, governments, universities and researchers and civil society come together and try to use the type of relationships that we've built over decades in the cyber context to right out of the gates, make sure that we have the right partnerships around potential emerging threats for AI. And Munich is a good example of one of those. We have formed already industry partnerships that mean that very early on we are contributing to a shared sense of best practices and standards when it comes to developing safe and secure AI, and when it comes to deploying it in ways that enhance user trust. Munich was election focused in particular. And one thing that I think was important for us is at Google, we've had the benefit of also over decades building up the types of best practices internally that we use to make sure that users can trust what they see on our platforms in the context of elections where information really matters. Not all companies have been able to build up those practices. So something like the Munich Accord really helped us align on shared standards and raise the bar for everyone. We know that harms don't originate and don't end on our platforms. If you don't have a shared sense of, for instance, how do we understand, where content is coming from and how do we help our users understand that? It's fine if Google works that out for themselves, but we know that content moves from Google to TikTok to Twitter to, X, to YouTube, to WhatsApp, on and off platforms. And so we want to make sure we basically have some alignment and some standards and transparency around the way that we treat similar content across our platforms. And that's partly what Munich was about. And it's also a matter of getting into the practice and the habit of sharing information as the situation around us evolves. So I think you're seeing companies and governments come together right out of the gate to say, what do we know about the risks and opportunities of this space? What do we not know, but how do we get into a relationship with each other and start to align on some basic standards so as the external environment evolves, we can all as a group evolve with it. And I think that's just as important as the specific commitments we made.
Yeah, I think that's really, it's really important work, and I think people who are like newer to the cybersecurity space don't always understand the way companies which, might traditionally compete cooperate on some of these issues. And I think it's important because it's not just companies. I don't think there's any government agencies involved in the Munich Accord, but in other things there are, where it truly becomes this public-private effort, right? And where we look at things like the internet as a shared resource, right? Again, nobody owns it, right? So everybody has to kind of keep their part of the community, as secure as possible. And then we're incredibly reliant on other people to do their part as well, right? So, and I think, AI is kind of fresh to the scene, and I'm just very thrilled to see this kind of cooperation so early. Those of you who've been around cybersecurity for a while know, when I started in cybersecurity in 2008, the holy grail of cybersecurity was information sharing, right? No one could figure out how to share information. Companies were already doing it. People, at Google, at Microsoft, at other places had listservs of their cybersecurity, colleagues, right? And if they saw something, they shot an email to them. Hey, look what we saw today. You've probably seen it too, right? That was cybersecurity. But now we have this much more sophistication around this. And so I just want to say, this is from my perspective, this is a good thing. Right, and I hope we see more of this, and obviously this was geared toward the election, and we need to see more of it. But there's also some work being done around this on the watermarking issue as well. Yeah. So could you, talk a little bit, what do you think the role that kind of watermarking is going to play, and then how people are working together on that?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think watermarking, you think about it in the broad category of provenance. What is provenance? It is, where is this information that I'm seeing online? Where does it come from, and can I trust that that's really where it comes from? So that's a big challenge when it comes to the ability to create new images, audio, and text from AI. We focus so far particularly on images and audio, and watermarks are one way that creators of synthetic content can embed basically a key that'll allow you to understand where that content is coming from. So Google is both pioneering technology in watermarks. We have a product called SynthID, which content originators can use and embed in their content, which can be recognizable to others, and we've made that broadly available through our enterprise relationships to others. And we've joined an organization called C2PA, which is about developing shared standards for provenance. Watermarking is one component of that, but there are other ways that we're going to build on the notion of we should be able to recognize content. Good actors should be able to label and make their content easily identifiable as synthetic, so that when platforms are receiving an image or piece of audio from another source, they can easily authenticate it. And it ties back to some authentication notion that is important in the cybersecurity context, but there's also a basic user literacy notion too. And we're really excited. It's early days, but we're pioneering research, productizing it as soon as we can, and entering into partnerships with others to make it real.
Yeah, and I think that's just, again, another example of how everybody, has to do this together, but also it's a challenge, right? I mean, because, doing it at the same time that the technology is rolling out. So it's going to be, so I think any, last advice for folks as we, either as like recipients of material or that they should be paying attention to, or if they're producers of material that they should be paying attention to?
So I would say, we'll probably hear this, sorry, I think my mic is a little, is that better?
It's the speakers.
Oh, it's the speakers. Okay. We're good. Okay.
We're working on it.
Some of the best, there's actually a productivity coach at Google who's amazing, who has a book coming out, Laura Mae Martin. She's fantastic. So when her book comes out, buy it, because all she does is think about how to make people more effective with the technology that they use. And one of her key pieces of advice when I sat down with her to just learn from her was, take one day and get your digital life in order. Go online and make sure that you're part of Google's advanced protection program, that when you're using Workspace, you have the tools to make sure that you've got, all the platforms make sort of privacy and security settings, they should make them pretty easily accessible to you. Just put it on your calendar and spend some time making sure that you're availing yourself of that. Because I think we think about this as, there are lots of upstream things we can do that we can build into our platforms, but there's an entire sort of it takes a village approach, and it goes down to the individual. So do make sure that you are that you understand. Go to myaccount.google.com at Google and make sure that if you use Google products and services, that you're really taking advantage of what they have to offer. When it comes to the information that you see online, use the context tools that are available to judge for yourself whether you can rely on it or not, and help others around you understand that too. Because we do run the risk of getting into a doom loop where we don't understand and value the information that we're seeing. At Google, in the context of something like elections, we try to use authoritative sources, traditional media, et cetera, so that you know what you're seeing and whether you can trust it. And it's that relationship too that's going to matter. I think you might have some more tips.
Yeah, well, when I was at NCSA, we used to do a campaign called Digital Spring Cleaning, which was basically the same thing. Get your digital life in order when you after you clean out your garage.
Exactly.
So, Lori, thank you so much. This was great. I hope that there's a lot of interesting information here. And again, we really appreciate all the work that you do. We appreciate the work you do with us, and we appreciate the leadership in the community at large around cybersecurity and AI. And so, we got some. Hopefully not too bumpy roads ahead between now and November, but we're glad of all the partners that we have to get us there. So thank you so much.
We appreciate it as well.
Thanks,
everybody.
I assume, do you want to be on the end or in the middle?
Well, should we? Either way, I don't care. Whatever. Maybe on the end for photography purposes.
Yeah, maybe that'll make it easier for you.
Trust. I mean, that was a very
Okay.
good speaker. She
I like this room.
light years.
Yeah. We have a great panel here today. I am Mark Vesey. I am a reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I cover election administration and the Georgia House of Representatives. And we also have our guests here. I will let them introduce themselves. Go ahead, Matthew.
My name is Matthew Wilson. I am the first vice chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia.
I'm Ryan O'Toole. I work with Google's Trust and Safety team, specifically on their global election integrity team, focused on coordinating our U.S. election efforts this year.
And I'm Josh McCoon. I'm chairman of the Georgia Republican Party.
So what we're going to talk about today is cybersecurity and campaigns, which is a topic for me I don't usually think about, right? But I think it might be important, and that's what we're going to learn about. I think about campaigns, and I think about advertisements. I think about issues. I think about news coverage. I think about what I see online and in social media. But there's this whole other aspect that we're going to talk about today, which is cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, misinformation, deep fakes, threats, right? So that's what I want to ask you all, because you're the experts on these subjects, working with your candidates who have just qualified to run for office just last week across the state. How big of a deal is cybersecurity and artificial intelligence this year? Is it something that candidates and their campaigns need to be thinking about? And is it something that voters need to be thinking about? And fundamentally, the big picture, is this worrisome for democracy that there could be these forms of interference in campaigns? Why don't you lead us off, Matthew?
Yeah, I don't think we can understate how critical cybersecurity has become for campaigns of all sizes. Obviously we're in the midst of a presidential election year, and the focus is on the presidential campaigns, and they're going to have billions of dollars spent to get their candidates elected, which is mind-numbing. But both Josh and I have ran our own legislative campaigns, and I think he would agree with me that the smaller the campaign is, the much bigger the risk for chaos and catastrophe can be, especially now because so much of what our campaigns do on a daily basis, so much of the infrastructure is completely digital. I was thinking about it on the way over here, and really the only analog aspects to most campaigns now are yard signs, leaflets that get mailed to your mailboxes, and then depending on what the campaign is, the size of the campaign, door knocking, canvassing in person, or in-person events. But all of that is organized digitally. And so all of the voter files are all contained online. So, the campaigns I spend time thinking about are the much smaller campaigns, the state house, state senate campaigns, but even the local races where they're running on just a few tens of thousands of dollars for their campaign. They don't have the capability to build out exhaustive infrastructure to protect against cybersecurity. So those are the types of things that the DNC and our state party here in Georgia are spending time trying to think about.
Good. And Josh, how big is the threat? Should we be worried?
Absolutely. I mean, I think when you think about just over the last 10 or 15 years, how things have changed. When I first ran for the legislature, I'll just use fundraising as an example. Almost all of the funds we raised were paper checks. They were in-person transactions. And I can tell you today, the vast majority of campaign fundraising from the local level up to the federal level is conducted almost exclusively through online platforms. And so just that issue alone, think about a hacker that disables your ability to raise money at a crucial moment in the phase of the campaign. And I think the attention on it, and one of the reasons I'm glad we're here today talking about this, campaigns are inherently temporary creatures. They exist for one purpose and one purpose only, which is to elect the candidate to office. And so they have scarce resources, limited time. The focus is obviously on those things that will get the candidate elected, but there are some very important roadblocks that can occur if you fall prey to a cyber attack. So we certainly have data and security folks at the RNC. We have personnel at the state party that work in partnership with the RNC. We do a lot to guard the data that we have access to through our partnership with the Republican National Committee. It's something that's very important to us. As we get our nominees in May, we're going to have a one-day training seminar focusing on a lot of different aspects of our campaigns. But this is going to be part of it, because whether it's the data that campaigns are generating, I mean, you think about that donor data and other data you're getting that has personal identifying information, what steps are you taking to guard that data? And then again, making sure your campaign can function, that you don't lose access to the online tools you need to effectively campaign in 2024.
Yeah, just building actually off of what both of you had said, I think understanding that life cycle of campaigns at the state level is really important. Of course, I think a lot of the attention, as you said, always goes to the federal level, the presidential level. But what we're seeing is a lot of threat actors understand that at the state and local level, the juice is worth the squeeze because of the sort of learning curve, if you will, around cybersecurity practices. The resourcing, as both of you have alluded to, is a major constraint for campaigns at this level as well. And so we're continuing to see more nuanced approaches to how these threat actors are targeting campaigns at this level. And so trying to meet the resourcing challenge for them through partnerships like this is exactly why I think we're focusing on campaigns at this level and the level of importance that they should receive. So.
Good. We just heard a lot about potential targeting of campaigns and candidates, but that isn't the only threat. We also have misinformation. We have the possibility of deep fakes through artificial intelligence. We have traditional mudslinging of campaigns. Are those, they aren't directly cybersecurity, but they're related issues. Do you feel like those dangers are something that you're also having to guard against, or is your role more focused purely on the cybersecurity, we don't want to be hacked aspect of it? Any of you, go ahead.
So I would say that as opposed to tools to stop that from happening, I think that we've got to assume to a certain degree, certainly traditional negative contrast campaigning is going to occur, and these additional ways to abuse the process to put out false information are a reality and are increasingly going to be a reality. So I think campaigns and candidates have to spend more time than ever on their rapid reaction plan and be able to very quickly knock down those kinds of things. You have to be prepared to identify it very quickly and then get out in front of it as quickly as you can. Obviously, I know the legislature here in Georgia is wrestling with some of those issues and trying to actually put into place some criminal penalties for some of the activity you're referring to. But I think, if a candidate asks me, I'm going to say, you need to invest some resources in rapid reaction because it's going to be a bigger problem than it's ever been.
I would say from the Google perspective, trying to ensure that information environment is something that is conducive to our users and voters and campaigns broadly are able to participate in the democratic process. That means standing up a regime of an information environment that is clear for them, right, through 2024. And I think that starts with some of the foundational policy that Google's stood by for past cycles. So things like our demonstrably false claims, manipulated media policy, hate and harassment. These are things that help formulate our approach to different information or content pieces that may be questionable. On the other side of the house, we're sort of, and especially with the advent of AI, looking at different tools to sort of proactively empower users. Some of that is, again, in policy. Others, it's actual sort of levers that they can pull within their toolkit. Google was one of the first to roll out their synthetic media ad disclosure, requiring advertisers to label AI-generated content within their advertisements, and so trying to provide more context to the environment is part of that policy basis. But as I mentioned, there's a number of tools from past cycles that we're building off of, like the Google Fact Check Explorer, which will allow you to take a look at a piece of content, either text or image form, and assess some of the context behind it. So really trying to empower both through that foundation of policy, but also the toolkit that we're carrying over from past election cycles to make sure that that information environment is something that is conducive to that full participation in the democratic process. So it is a little bit of the information and content clarity, but it's certainly cybersecurity as well.
I'll just echo what Josh said on our side. I mean, the deep fakes, the misinformation, it's a much more systemic cultural issue that state parties and national parties aren't going to be able to self-correct just by ourselves. But what we can do is, like what Josh was saying, is make sure that our candidates, our campaigns, our parties have the ability to respond and try to negate those. I mean, one of the reasons I think that misinformation is so viral these days is because so much of our, and no offense to our media representative here, but so much of our traditional news media has become balkanized that there is no one place people look for truth, right? And so we have a lot of shades of truth. And we're dealing with folks who, like everyone in this room, have a million things going on every day, and their attention span or ability to be able to actually research issues is very limited. So what that means for the party level is we've seen much more emphasis on rapid response type organizations within our national party, state party, and of course we're encouraging our campaigns to be thinking through this on the front end as well.
I'm interested in hearing more about the rapid response. What does that look like? How do you get the word out? Are you trying to target your supporters to debunk opposition attacks, or are you trying to go more broader, try to reach a mass market through traditional TV, radio, or newspaper media, or do you go to social media, or do you go to Google? What's your advice to candidates about how to handle misinformation in a competitive campaign environment?
All of that. I think it starts on the front end when you're first starting a campaign for a candidate, is a traditional phase of oppositional research, right? And not just against your opponents, what contrast can you make with your opponents, but also what do you expect the contrast they're going to draw with you is going to be? What skeletons are they going to attempt to pull out of your closet or paint you with? You need to anticipate those things. And every candidate training that I've ever been through or seen or partnered with has some aspect of this. Is thinking through this on the front end. How would you rebut that? Does it mean having other trusted folks in that space who can come in and speak to your integrity and character? Is it just running, flooding the zone with all the good stuff that you've done in the past, your record, so to speak? It's based on what the actual attack is, I would say. But you have to spend time on the front end, and then there has to be that infrastructure there.
Right. I'm used to, when I encounter disinformation, you have to weigh the risk of amplifying it versus the value of debunking it. Is that something that you weigh, and what advice do you give to your party's candidates?
Yeah, I think, again, that's why training on rapid response and having some kind of personnel dedicated to rapid response is so important, right? Because you are going to have to make that decision about, do you take it head on, and then how do you do it, right? I mean, you generally don't repeat the accusation in your response, for example. You put out information to make it clear that the accusation is not accurate. For example, the Ohio Senate primary, I think, is going on today. Last week, there was a negative attack issued against one of the candidates. That candidate came forward with information that really undercut the reporting of that attack and communicated it in that case to Republican primary voters. Again, I think the part of your question about what medium do you use and who do you target is a very fact-dependent and context-specific question, right? It depends on what campaign are we talking about. Is it a primary or general election? Where are we in the campaign process? Where did the misinformation originate? I think all of those things come into that picture. And I think what campaigns have to be willing to do, more so further down ballot. I mean, I think about some Virginia state legislative races last cycle that we saw this sort of issue come up, and you've got to have those resources in place, because if you don't, if you just have a traditional, well, I've got somebody that's putting out press releases for me once a week, you're going to be caught flat-footed. You're not going to respond in time. That narrative is going to take hold. And so speed and knowing where your response needs to go is really, really important.
Look, I think industry can play a role in that too, and I outlined a couple of different tools. I think part of the training that you had talked about and doing that really on a day one basis, sort of starting off your campaign organization with familiarity with the tools that can help them push back on some of this, and incorporating that into your rapid response team is one way that we're lending a hand to making sure that those rapid response operations are something that have accurate tools that they can then sort of elevate and raise as a signal to say, hey, we actually have information that is counter to what's out there with respect to a given narrative.
Good. We're here in 2024. It is the presidential election year, and the environment surrounding information and disinformation and reaching voters has changed so much over, not just over the last 4 years, but think back to 2016. That presidential election, we heard so much about foreign interference through Facebook, for example. And then 2020, it was less about foreign interference and more about who's telling the truth and which candidates do you believe. Have you seen the threat environment change a lot in the last 4 years? And if so, in what ways what are the most emerging or newest threats to misinformation or cybersecurity that you've seen crop up in recent years?
I'm actually happy to take that one first. I think AI is sort of the flavor of the day, right? But it has acted as a force multiplier for some of these threat actors, right? And so when we're talking about what vulnerabilities exist for campaigns at the state level, national has a little more of the attention. National campaigns have a little more of the attention. So the media cycle that they can engage with to push back on misinformation, I think, is a little stronger. For state level campaigns, I mentioned earlier the juice is really worth the squeeze for some of these foreign influence operations. One, because their resourcing is not the same or commensurate with what we see at the national party, and thus their IT experience or infrastructure is also at a reduced sort of posture. I think when we're trying to clarify an information environment, in addition to sort of seeing these foreign influence operations and threats, it's in part the toolkit that I had mentioned in terms of clarifying tools like our Google Fact Checker, things like About This Image, which can give you context around some of the images that you might be seeing online. Those are things that can help just inform your sort of viewpoint on some of what these threats look like. In terms of what we've seen, I think in recent years, the foreign influence operations have really become quite sophisticated, and I think the best way that we've seen to sort of push back on that is consistent reporting that is accessible to those campaigns at every level. And one way we do that is through our threat analysis group quarterly reports, which issue specific cybersecurity threat information. And in 2024, that will contain specific election-related cybersecurity threat information. So really trying to broadcast out what that threat looks like as it's really increased on the foreign influence operations side.
I would just add that, the big thing that I've noticed in the last 4 years really is, certainly at the national level, but even more so just in Georgia, as we become more a closer state, I guess I'll say, more 50-50 or 40-40 or whatever number allocation you want to provide between the parties and the candidates. The margin of that's going to decide the outcome of that election, it has continued to shrink year after year after year, especially at the national level, and especially given that we have the same two candidates that ran 4 years ago. So what does that mean? Well, like I was talking about earlier, the smaller your campaign is, the bigger the risk for chaos is. I think of it the same way. The smaller that margin is, the less that the bad actors have to actually do to create chaos. And so the stakes just go way, way, way up. And we've seen this too here on the state level, just the closer our state politics has become, and with the back and forth between the parties, the more that plays out at the state level as well.
So I would say that certainly the environment for these kinds of attacks has gotten worse, or I guess the environment for the attacks to take root has gotten better, however you want to put that. A lot of that has to do with the fact that so much of campaigns take place online now versus, again, just a short while ago. I think that COVID accelerated a lot of trends that we were heading in that direction. But I can tell you every election cycle since I could drive a car, I have gone out and knocked on doors. And it has gotten progressively more difficult to get people to answer the door and interact with you at that level. So even someone running for city council or county commission or state legislature, where in a lot of those races, if you could get people to interact with you at that level, you could touch a lot of those folks and knock down a lot of potential misinformation, because they could say, you know, I sat at my door with Josh for 30 minutes and I spoke to him, and I know X is not true about him. Now that level of person-to-person campaigning, even campaign events, rallies and things of that nature, it's harder and harder to get those in-person opportunities. So as campaigns become more online and we have the fragmented audience that Matthew referred to, I mean, there's not just one place people go to get this information. There's this chasing of virality to get across a lot of different platforms, and a lot of times, you know, chasing that is coming up with outrageous, outlandish things that are not true. So I definitely think the environment is ripe for that kind of attack to occur, and which is why campaigns have to be more on guard than ever, and candidates as well.
Mm-hmm. We've been talking a lot about this issue from the perspective of the political parties and the campaigns. I always like to try to frame things in terms of voters, like what is the risk to voters of these threats. So, for example, is the risk, you know, campaigns often have a lot of voter information. They have their campaign donor list, they have the voter histories, they know the voters in their district, they know who they're going to target. Is it a significant risk that if there were a breach, that voter information could be released? Like, you know, for example, if a business is hacked, you worry about confidential voter or individual personal information being released. Is that a risk in campaigns? You know, a lot of this information is public anyway. Is that what voters should be worried about, or should they be more worried about, you know, misinformation and deceptive media and untruths kind of painting their perceptions for political advantage? What do you feel is the worry from the voters' perspective?
I think it's both, right? We can't disregard the threat of cybersecurity and sort of the threat of misinformation, right? These are all things that have to be weighted equally, as they're sort of overlapping, right? And that's the overall threat. When we talk about data security, I think what's really foundational, and you may have mentioned this at the beginning, is starting out your campaign day one with a culture of cybersecurity awareness. And that means everybody that you onboard is going through a training set that both outlines the threats, so characteristics around phishing scams, malware campaigns, and the like, how those might manifest on your platform, how those are going to potentially impact your organization. Then the other side of the coin, what are the tools and solutions and best cybersecurity practices, things like password manager, two-factor authentication, the suite of offerings that we work closely with DDC to provide. Those are things that, again, on day one should be instituted to create that cybersecurity cultural awareness. And I think when we're talking about really sensitive data that is both public and private, it's a really good step to not only signal to the individuals within your organization, the organization at large, and then sort of external constituencies who have equities in that data, that you're taking every step to make sure that the accounts that control that data are as secure as possible, and then the subsequent data is also as secure. So I think that first step is something that has to be done right out of the gate, and just applying those tools right away can help protect some of that data.
Good. Josh?
So I think I would agree both concerns are valid. I mean, it hasn't been that many years ago that we had the incident with the Secretary of State's office sending out CD-ROMs that had personal identifying information on them. And so you're always trying to get better, right? You know, you have electronic transfer of that data. We all try to be very careful about making sure that PI is not compromised in the use of that data, and we take a lot of steps to prevent that from happening. I think when we talk about voters guarding against misinformation, I mean, I'll just make a very old-fashioned plea I've been making for a very long time, which is we do not participate enough in our democratic process. The average voter, even the average person that takes the time to go out and vote, how much time is that person spending learning about their candidates? You know, I think it's always an interesting conversation to have with somebody, and I don't do this in a big group setting, don't want to embarrass anybody, but a lot of times I'll be having lunch with somebody and I'll say, do you know who your state representative is? Do you know who your state senator is? Do you know who your county commissioner is? You know, so apathy, voter apathy, or a lack of engagement with the process is what allows these kinds of attacks to take hold. And so we all need to take a degree of ownership. I'm not excusing people that try to abuse the process and spread misinformation, but if all of us take a little bit more ownership in terms of that civic responsibility and understanding the candidates who are on the ballot before we show up at the polling place, those attacks will be much less effective. So if I was able to speak to voters just sort of writ large, that's what I would say is invest a little bit more time as you prepare to participate in the democratic process on learning the candidates, learning about them. Because if you do that, most of this misinformation is not going to be effective because you're going to have learned the facts about your choices.
And I would agree with Josh. That's probably the one thing that keeps me up at night is that the zone is so flooded with misinformation that for voters it can just be easy to paint a big broad brush and say, well, you know, you're all crooks out to just make money for yourselves. So, you know, I don't want to talk to any of you. I don't want to learn about any of you. And the biggest threat I think we have really is people disengaging from the process, even if that just means I'm just going to show up and I'm going to vote on election day, but that's all I'm going to do. That still, to me, is you have disengaged from the process because, as Josh was saying, you haven't necessarily spent the time to learn about the candidates or the particular issues that are going to be on the ballot. And this year in particular, for you know, the primaries, you know, we have issues that are actually on the ballot that voters will be voting on. So and have voted on. So you know, for me, that's our big challenge, is trying to figure out how do we, with everything else going on, how do we keep people engaged in this process and understanding that it is just driven by humans like you and me and these humans that are sitting up here who are trying to make our communities a better place. And the face of that is the candidates, but behind those candidates are a whole lot of people who are driving this process and who the process relies upon. And if more people check out from that process, again, when that margin is really small, the risk for chaos goes disproportionately up.
Mm-hmm. We have hundreds of candidates running for a wide variety of races, from state senate, state house, county commissions, sheriffs, clerks, on up to Congress and president this year. You all in the political parties, you're not running the campaigns, you're advising and supporting the campaigns. If you were talking to a candidate who is working very hard, trying to reach their community, doesn't have a lot of time to think about cybersecurity or how to counter misinformation, maybe they only have a few minutes to spend on this topic, but they need to do something constructive. Do you have advice of like 3-4 things that they can do in a few minutes that would have a great impact, whether that be stronger passwords or two-factor authentication or having a response plan? What are things that you would advise candidates that they can take care of that wouldn't be too hard but would make a difference?
Well, I think you know, one of the things we haven't talked about today that I think is really important in this space, you know, Ryan talked about if you're onboarding employees, making sure that they're aware of potential cybersecurity threats. But so much of individual campaigns are really carried on by vendors. And I will tell you, that's sort of an opaque world, right? I mean, the average first-time candidate, there's not like a Consumer Reports issue you can go get out on who's in political consulting, who's in direct mail, who's in handling your online and digital presence. And so I think really vetting those vendors, I mean, just looking out in the crowd here today, I see a couple of people that have been involved in it for a long time, that are really good at what they do. I know that because I've been engaged in politics for a long time, but the average candidate doesn't know that. So I think having a really clear vetting process with your the vendors that you're going to hire, because you want somebody that's been around. You certainly want somebody that's familiar with these issues. If they're managing your website or they're handling your digital marketing or your fundraising particularly, you want to make sure it's somebody that's been in the business, that understands these issues, and is going to take the appropriate safeguards against them, just like you would want the employees of your campaign to do.
Yeah, and I'm not as old as Josh, so I haven't been in politics quite as long, but he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right that the vendor piece is a critical component that campaigns probably don't think that much about. And asking those vendors up front, what is your cybersecurity plan? What practices do you have in place? But one of the things that we've done on the Democratic side is we've really just tried to be a clearinghouse of resources for starting with our state parties, but then also candidates, and then just honestly the general public. We have at the DNC level, there's a comprehensive website that state parties have access to that runs the gamut of everything from software updates that are really critical to multi-factor authentication that need to be put in place, and best practices for handling pieces of the voter file, for example, and voter information like that. We also have we try to make it part of the regular communication that we have with campaigns, and then from the DNC perspective with state parties. So we have a dedicated tech team. I know the RNC does too. And they are regularly communicating with state parties and through them, local parties and campaigns about the newest threats that we've seen and how to guard against those things. So, and I do want to give a shout out to one person who is here, one of our other Democratic Party of Georgia vice chairs, Scout Smith, who's in charge of candidate recruitment. And I know he has these conversations with candidates on the front end of, they come to him and say, okay, I want to run for state house. What comes next? And, it's like, okay, well, how many weeks do you have? Because there's a lot that you need to do. But having those resources, the checklists that we provide, we feel that's a very good way to get started and sort of get your foot in the door with having those conversations and then incorporating them on a regular basis with all the other communications that we have with campaigns.
Great. What are some of the top tools that campaigns and candidates can use?
Yeah, I think just building off of something that you guys both said with respect to the vendors, I think that culture of cybersecurity awareness can be broader than your immediate organization too, right? And should incorporate other third parties that your organization is working with, like those vendors, and that's a good foundational step. With respect to Google accounts, there's a number of steps that you can take to secure those right off the bat. And I think the first one I would point to is our security checkup, which is sort of a step-by-step analysis of your current security posture. And we'll make some personalized recommendations to just fine-tune that a little more tightly. The second piece, and this was mentioned, I think earlier, two-factor authentication has been around for a while. I think we're all familiar with sort of the push notification or the set of digits that you get to then plug into another device. But really the best-in-class authentication key is a physical one that can be paired with your two-factor authentication infrastructure. And so we've been proud to work very closely with DDC for a number of cycles now to provide literally thousands of those Titan keys to campaigns, making sure that they have that highest level of two-factor authentication. We also have two other components that will help enhance your security. One of them is called Advanced Protection Program, and this is something that will apply across your organization and gives a little more proactive monitoring around threats like phishing attempts, malware campaigns, and the like. And then if for one reason or another you're not able to take advantage of that, we have something called Enhanced Protection that is a temporary elevation of your security for your Google accounts and can be applied to both personal devices, or personal accounts, official accounts, and then also to domains broadly. So really trying to make sure that while we understand campaigns are eager for as much much cybersecurity protections as they get, their infrastructure may not be conducive to every tool that we have, and so trying to offer different solutions that sort of plug into their infrastructure is part of the goal there. So those are sort of 4 rough steps that I think from a Google account perspective, we would sort of offer right away to a candidate to make sure that they're tightening up their cybersecurity apparatus.
Good. When I look at the landscape, I think of how online everything is today compared to 20 or 30 years ago, how it's hard to communicate sometimes the level of risk or the degree of vulnerability, because so much of it is unknown, right? We're talking about dangers that might happen, might not, right? It's hard to sometimes communicate to people and candidates that you need to prepare for if things do go sideways. And they might not, but maybe they will. Can you help me characterize how significant the danger is, both for voters and for candidates? How worried should we be? How dangerous is this online world where we do have everything from deep fakes to breaches that seem to be somewhat routine in large companies that you'd think would have stronger protections, right? And then we have candidates who are not large companies dealing with sensitive information as well. How bad is it out there when you talk about cybersecurity and misinformation threats?
I had referenced earlier something called the Threat Analysis Report, that quarterly report that outlines how terrifying that landscape can be, especially specific to elections and campaigns. There are a number of things that I think have made 2024 a little more novel, right? The geopolitical environment's pretty nuanced. We have the advent of other technologies like generative AI. And so I think where we found the most success, and this ties a little bit back to something that Michael had said in the other panel, having a public-private collaboration where we have a relationship with industry like Google, who can provide the best-in-class tools, the expertise that Defending Digital Campaigns brings to that conversation, and then is able to push those out in a way that is broadly received. And then, of course, the credibility that we get from working closely with the state and national parties. I think that really drives the message home to these campaigns at every level, how legitimate the threat is, but also that there's a network out there that they can tap into and lean on, not just from those sort of 3 entities, but even within Google, our civics outreach team, which puts on wonderful events and opportunities like this to help evangelize, for lack of better phrasing, this incredible work. And so I think that helps both drive how scary the threat can be, but also lets campaigns know that there is an abundance of resources out there to help protect them.
I think that the big challenge in terms of dealing with this environment, which I think is as I said earlier, I think the worst that it's been, is to make sure that campaigns, as I said earlier, they really have 2 resources: money and time. And the discussion today is, obviously, there are a lot of resources that are available to campaigns and candidates to deal with this threat that will not cost money. So I feel like the role of the party is to make sure that we communicate to our candidates that, hey, you do need to carve out the time to understand how to take advantage of these tools that are being provided to you, so that you can avoid a lot of these threats. So I do think there's a little bit of educate about how significant the threat environment is so that the candidates will make it a priority to carve out that time on the front end of the campaign so they don't find themselves in that sort of nightmare scenario that they're locked up from their tools that they need to campaign in the final push, that they are held responsible for the release of sensitive data of people that are going to be voting for or against them in an election. So I think that's our challenge here in this election cycle, is to make sure our campaigns and candidates understand how important this is so that they will take advantage of these tools being offered to mitigate that threat as much as possible.
Yeah, it's certainly scary out there, but this room doesn't need us to tell you that. But what brings me peace about the whole thing, I would say, is kind of like what Ryan was talking about. The best way, I think, to fend off any attack is to have a multi-layered defense, and having a public-private partnership, but also just within our party having tools at the national level, at the state level, and then encouraging those campaigns to take advantage of those resources is the best way that we can fend this off. And to go back to an anecdote that Josh used earlier, I think really the best way that we can fend all of this off is to open our doors and go to the end of your driveways. Set up your lemonade stands and your Girl Scout cookie stands, and I promise you candidates will show up out of nowhere. It is the season. They are among us. And talk to them and find out who they are and what issues they're running on. And then try a non-confrontational way to talk to your neighbors about those things too.
Great, great. Well, we are at the end. I really appreciate all of you. What I take away from this, the message seems to be that the response is multifaceted, but also that candidates and voters should be thinking about this. And there are a lot of things that people can do to protect themselves. And oftentimes we can help by communicating and providing tools and giving messages that are trustworthy and accurately, but at the same time, it's also a difficult world out there and hard to reach everybody. So I really do appreciate all of your work to try to think about and work through these issues and prepare for the unexpected in this election year. So I appreciate your work and thank you for being willing to talk about these issues and for sharing them with this room. Great, thank you.
Yeah, we're
close.
ready. Welcome back, everyone. Oh, I guess we don't have the microphones. Is that
No, you're gonna have to yell.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Gonna just keep going away here. This has really been a great morning so far, and I have the really the honor of moderating this panel. Let me just tell you, I'll have them introduce themselves in a second. But let's just say, from the DDC perspective, Defending Digital Campaigns, this is where the rubber hits the road with us. These are the folks that we work with and the products that we work with every single day, and then we try to get campaigns to adopt. So always love this part of the day because we get to talk about sort of like what we're really doing and those kinds of things. But let me start down to the end and just have people, Nick, introduce yourself and just write down and tell people what you do, and we'll make it
Well, thank you, Michael. Appreciate you all having us here and you serving as our moderator. My name is Nick Pearson. I'm on the Government Affairs and Public Policy team at Google. But more importantly, I'm an Atlanta, Georgia native. I'm a Grady baby born less than a mile away. Started my career here in state and local politics many years ago, but have been in Washington, D.C. working for Google for almost a decade now. So thank you for having me. I'm here to talk about Workspace, our suite of products that we offer on the enterprise level. And how important those tools are for cybersecurity, especially in an election environment.
I'm Mary Mangione. I work on the communications team at Yubico. We are in the cybersecurity space and we create a physical security key called the YubiKey. And as part of my role, I oversee our Secure It Forward program, which is our philanthropic arm of our company, where we donate security keys at no cost to journalists, human rights defenders, DDC, and really just work to ensure that the entire world is protected.
I'm Seth Blank. I'm the CTO of Valamel, and I chair a couple of industry email security bodies. And at Valamel, our job is to help organizations' email be trusted and ensure it's only from them. And we've seen historically with campaigns, right, people come and go. Security and authentication aren't necessarily priorities for campaigns, and there's enormous gaps. And so we're excited to partner with DDC and make this easy and accessible for everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace Hoyt. I lead our privacy, safety, and security partnerships team at Google. In particular, I focus on our products and partnerships, such as with the Defending Digital Campaigns team, to protect those that are at highest risk of targeted cyber attacks. I don't know if everybody knows this, but Google ourselves were we were hacked in 2009 by Chinese link bad actors. At that time, we formed a team, including our threat analysis group, which you'll hear a little bit about. We took the step to adopt security keys across our entire organization. First keys we had were actually from the team over at Yubico. So very excited to discuss some of our products for campaigns, in particular the Advanced Protection Program.
Great. So I'm going to actually start with you, Seth. How many people in this room have ever gotten an email from a campaign? Yeah. So it's kind of like something that campaigns do, right? Is send out a lot of messaging, either fundraising or, other kinds of messaging. So protecting it is really kind of critical to what they do. So can you talk a little bit about the risk that campaigns have around email going outbound? There's inbound email, there's outbound email. We're talking about the outbound email here. And also, what campaigns need to do to protect that outbound email now? Because there's some changes afoot.
Absolutely. So the bad news is it's actually easy and legal to send fake email at someone and impersonate them. And that's the playing field that we operate in today. As a campaign, the email you send to reach your audience, someone else can send that same email to that audience or other people. And there are open standards that are available that stop this impersonation, but you actually have to put the work in. And this is work we don't historically see campaigns do. And with the space we've been talking about, generative AI and all these other threats today, it's a step you have to take. And critically, there are new requirements from Google and Yahoo that are going into play now, actually started in February and rolling, that are requiring strong authentication for email. And this is to stop, in the greater sphere, the scourge of spam and phishing we're seeing, especially since they've skyrocketed since COVID hit and remote work hit the nation and the world at large. For campaigns in particular, this is work that if you do not do, the mail may not reach your audience. And obviously, campaigns thrive on email. You want your email to get through to your audience, and you want to make sure it's only your message from a campaign and not a bad actor impersonating you, not someone spreading disinformation in your name. And you have the tools today to turn it off. You have to prioritize it. And in partnership with DDC, we want to make it easy and accessible to everyone.
Yeah, and that process is called DMARC, right? So,
yes.
That's what you're doing. It's a mail authentication regime that you put in place that sends a signal to the rest of the ecosystem. This mail is actually coming from Michael. right?
Yeah.
And so they know to trust it. And that's, I mean,
exactly. The open standards are known as SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And DMARC's the gold standard, and that's what Google and Yahoo are requiring. And all the major international mailboxes, not just the US ones, are starting to follow suit, and we'll see this come in over time. And what we really want when we talk about strong authentication is we want sender identity. We want to know who you are, because threats come up if we do not know who we're talking to. Things can mean anything. If I'm talking to Mary, if I know I'm talking to Nick, I can make very different decisions than if anyone sends an email, hey, here's the latest about Google Workspace, click here to sign up. That's scary. But if I know it's from Google, now it's trusted and safe. And we want the machine to do that work before it's ever in front of a user, so that the user doesn't have to worry. They can think about the issues that are in front of them, not, is this a message I should be trusting or not?
So Mary, Yubico makes security keys that are really what we consider to be virtually unphishable form of multi-factor authentication. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that? But also, MFA is kind of this generic term, right? Everybody's heard it. We've all heard multi-factor authentication. But can you explain to people like the factor part and a little more in depth about how important different ones are?
Sure, absolutely. So I think everyone knows multi-factor authentication is just an extra layer of protection on top of your username and password. So what's really interesting about MFA is that not all are created equal. You have something that's on the less secure side, which would be an SMS text message that you might get from your bank that says, here's this code that you need to enter when you're logging in. Or you might pull out your phone and you have an authenticator app that's also generating a code. So both of these forms are considered not as secure because they run the risk of being intercepted by a bad actor. There can be a SIM swap, et cetera. And so what really is the gold standard is this physical security key, because a hacker or a bad actor would physically have to have that security key in order to log into your account. And so in terms of what types of accounts can benefit from MFA, virtually all of them. And I really want to call out specifically Google because their advanced protection program is really security done right. As part of the program, they require 2 physical keys to be set up when you enroll, which is at Yubico what we consider a best practice. And so that's really what Grace and what Michael really pushed campaigns to use, because that's really giving you that extra layer, and then you're not in fear of bad actors, et cetera, because they are not physically having that key with them in order to access the account.
Yeah, I mean, it's the number one recommendation we make, right? Because accounts are the most vulnerable thing. So if you secure your accounts, if your accounts are not secure and you secure them with a key and turn on APP, you've done a lot already from a starting point. So that's a lot of security added in. Grace, you go around the world telling people to be more secure. You focus is on high-risk users. Tell me a little bit about why people in this space are at such high risk, but also how you help them be more secure. We talked a little about some of these things, but I think you have some other stuff you want to talk about too.
No, thank you. And I think before speaking about high-risk users, just as Google, as a platform with the services we offer, it is our responsibility to make things secure out of the box. So, we talk about how phishing is the cause of over 90% of cyber attacks. Google blocks 99.9% of all phishing and spam automatically in Gmail Workspace. Like that is happening, that should not be seen by folks 99.9% of the time. However, there are a subset of folks using these tools who we consider at highest risk of targeted cyber attacks. Oftentimes that could be a nation state bad actor putting an outsized amount of resources in to try to get into that account. So for that, we created something called the Advanced Protection Program that Mary just mentioned. It does require security keys. It also includes additional protections such as restrictions on releasing your Google data externally to third-party sites and apps. So if you've indicated to Google that you consider yourself higher risk, maybe we're gonna check you before you share all of your Google Photos out with an app that you downloaded to use once. Those sort of protections, as well as additional scanning for things like malware. And I think what's really unique about the political campaign space is that these campaigns even they can be small campaigns of any size, but they can actually be the tip of the spear in terms of what attacks could reach the rest of us eventually, or could be a new frontier of an attack. So we do really use that advanced protection program to roll in the strongest, latest protections, and I can speak more about Workspace and the protections and innovations happening there. But that is really critical to us to look at, thinking of campaigns as high risk. And it's not just campaigns, but like the entire, ecosystem around campaigns. So the vendor ecosystem, journalists covering elections. So there are a lot of types of high-risk users. It's not just the political campaigns. But for us, we really wanted to provide this account security option, given that that is the biggest sort of attack vector that we see.
Nick, would you like to talk like a little about Workspace specifically and anything in there? Because I think, just as sort of a understanding, campaigns use a ton of technology. They rest on these technologies, whether it's yours or somebody else's, right? The platforms, as Grace is saying, all spend time trying to make them more secure. But tell us a little bit more about, from your perspective on this space, like how people should be thinking about it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. So as Grace said, this is core for Google. Secure by design is the foundation by which we build our products. It's how we operate our business. And frankly, on the campaign and election side, we love to educate folks on this side before you come over to the actual serving in office, where we have to deal with you all the time and deal with these same threat actors constantly around the clock. As Grace mentioned, we're seeing a marked increase from especially from nation-state actors such as China and Russia and North Korea that are constantly trying to infiltrate and sow discord. So we love our Workspace products. They are secure by design, whether it's search, whether it's Gmail, with Drive. We find that multi-factor authentication, two-step verification is key. We love partnering with DDC, with our Titan keys that we've given away both last year and this year to help educate folks on how important this is. And it's really key that we all, and I heard someone mention it earlier, and I think this is a great point of taking some time to actually go through and do a digital check of the well-being of your systems to make sure that your systems are safe, are up to date, and make sure that you're using all the factors, all the tools that are out there, the resources out there to remain secure. We love that with our Workspace tools, and we think these are important opportunities, not only on the campaign side, but once folks are actually elected as well.
Yeah, and I think, just to sort of add to that, the concept that like making it easier for people to adopt security. I don't know if there's any ways you want to discuss, that.
Yes, I think Michael's alluding to, we have been working closely with the Workspace team on ways to make it even faster for campaigns and easier for campaigns to crank up the security protections. I think our colleague Ryan spoke to this briefly earlier, but that is something we're really excited about. It's also an important aspect of this partnership that we hear from defending digital campaigns and the ecosystem. Okay, this template to switch something on, this could just be someone's spouse sitting at home setting up the Workspace for the first time. How do we make that simple and easy? So we're really excited. If you want, if you're a campaign or know folks in the ecosystem, this is available. Reach out to Michael and team. They'll get you set up with that new beta. It does things like step up your multi-factor authentication, password requirements, and other things that are best practice that folks should have turned on Workspace and really any enterprise space that they're using. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah, we're thrilled. It's really a way to get campaigns up and running with security as quickly as possible. So I've already raised, I think probably other people have talked about collaboration a lot already this morning, but I'm going to ask Grace and Mary to talk a little bit about passkeys, and which are another form of authentication, extremely secure, but also how they originated, because the security keys also originated from this same kind of collaboration of industry working together to make sure that things are secure for folks. So I don't know who wants to lead off on that one. Or?
You want to?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So passkeys, so we talked a bit about security keys, and sort of if you're looking at the spectrum of multi-factor authentication, we talked about standards bodies. There's a very important standards body called the FIDO Alliance that actually created the security key standard. The next iteration of that is something called passkey. It allows you to authenticate the same way you would sign into your phone. So it could be your phone PIN, fingerprint, Face ID, whatever you use to sign in. That is really useful to drive adoption of multi-factor authentication, right? We recognize for everyone, they're probably not going to take that step to turn on security keys. Obviously, that is a strong, what we recommend for high-risk individuals. But passkey really makes this more accessible. So Google, Microsoft, Yubico, other groups came together to say, we're going to support this standard, and we think everyone should do it. And one thing I'm really proud that Google has done is, a few years back, we announced our commitment to a passwordless future. So to get, passwords are not working, they're an attack vector. So, you heard that we are requiring DMARC. We are moving folks who use a Gmail account, you have to have a second factor of authentication. Passkey is a great answer to this. So I'll let Mary share a little bit more about what that means from how that works with security keys as well.
Absolutely, thanks Grace, that was a great explanation. So what I'll add to passkeys is it is just a new term for FIDO Authenticator. And as Grace mentioned, Yubico, Google, and other tech companies have been working on these open standards for years. So what we're really excited about is this greater adoption. And actually, YubiKeys have had passkeys supported since 2016. And one thing that with passkeys is there's two different types. You have your syncable passkeys and then you have device-bound passkeys, and both of these have their advantages. And as Grace mentioned, when we're looking at high-risk users, campaigns that are facing really intense threats from nation-state actors, cyber criminals that are highly motivated, they really want to be security first. So for that, we recommend using a device-bound passkey that is built into security keys, because that's really going to be your best line of defense against phishing.
And two things I'll add quickly to that. It can sound really cybersecurity-like and challenging maybe for the average person to wrap their head around the different authentication types. If folks are using Android and Chrome, they're probably already starting to use passkeys day to day and kind of like, oh, okay, you're getting an option to use that. You say yes, and it's working. So we've partnered with people's favorite, sites and apps that, it's already working on that. I think it's like the other one I saw recently was Home Depot. It's like you're going to check out, like you've got passkey set up. This works seamlessly. And on your way out, if you have not grabbed one today, we have the Titan security keys from Google that can store passkeys where you checked in this morning. So please do take those. If you're not a government official, those are available for you to take.
And it's just an example. Yeah, go ahead. You want to add?
Yeah, and to tie it back, I think we started with 91% of cyber attacks start from a phishing email, but it's credential harvesting. It's trying to get your username password that's probably weak that you might accidentally put in. If you use a passkey, that changes. And that's why we want passkeys, because we want to take username and password, weak usernames and passwords, and someone clicking the wrong form and putting their username and password in, out of play for attackers to use against your campaigns.
Yeah, it really, and it is one of the most, significant threats we still face are, people are the vulnerability at the end of the day, right? So protecting people is how we do it with these tools. We have just a few minutes left. I thought we'd just sort of, hit you all up on this question. So, people run campaigns, they're busy, they're focused, I think I said earlier, on winning. They've got a limited time frame between now and an election day. We have to grab their attention. Some of you have worked in the political space more than others, but how do we grab people's attention on this? And it's not just as awareness. People I think actually know that there are risks out there, but how do we get them to take the first step?
So I'll take this. It's usually not real for people until it happens to them. I can't tell you how many members of Congress, how many staffers have come to myself or Eric or William and their team because they've had some kind of incident on whatever their device may be. And I didn't think it could happen to me. I thought I was exempt. I thought that it happens to other folks, and it's not something that could potentially happen to that person. Forums like this, I think, are part of the ways that we can communicate and show folks that there are tools out there that can help improve the security of your systems. And then, frankly, you all getting the message out as well. Obviously, we'd love for you to use some of the products that our companies provide, but more importantly than anything else is just making sure that you're talking to your friends, your families, your colleagues on how important it is to have these tools in place and to make sure you're secure as you can be, because the risk is just not worth it when there are some simple tools that are out there that can help shore up your defense.
I wanted to set the landscape a little bit too about why cybersecurity is so important to campaigns specifically. And Michael mentioned earlier that Yubico and DDC co-authored this study, and we really wanted to look at voters and what their attitudes were around cybersecurity and more specifically trust in campaigns. And really interesting data, and a couple of the data points that I was really surprised by was 42% of those who have donated to a campaign said that they would consider not donating again if a campaign was hacked, and 30% said that they would consider voting for another candidate. And we all know that campaigns are built on monetary donations, they're built on trust, and ultimately support. So I think it's important that campaigns really understand what ramifications can be for not taking cybersecurity seriously. And the good news is that things like multi-factor authentication are so readily available. Things like security keys can be set up in minutes. So if there's anything to take away from this panel, it is to enable MFA on every single account that you can. And that's really going to be a simple tool that you can have that can run across the entire campaign, from volunteers to the politicians themselves, campaign managers, et cetera. And that will really kind of be your shield to prevent against these attacks that we're seeing.
Yeah, and I would say trust is the core, right? Where there's so many potential threats. We don't know what's going to really play out in these elections from a threat perspective, but we do know everything we're talking about is trying to erode trust, spread disinformation in some form, right? It's about trust. And digitally, trust is authentication. If we can authenticate you, we know it's you. And if it doesn't authenticate as you, technologically, we don't have to worry about it. We can just say goodbye. And so think about trust. Think about what you need to be trusted to your audience and take the appropriate digital precautions. Authenticate properly. And that will make a huge difference.
And I would just end with, for folks in the room, there are the top 5 tips from Google. I think I just want to give a shout out to the Defending Digital Campaigns team and their work, because you don't have to be a cybersecurity expert to take these few simple steps. As Mary said, it's readily available, or in the case of Workspace, it's out of the box there. Multi-factor authentication, and then a few basic hygiene things like update your software or set on automatic software updates will put you in a world of a better position if you take the few minutes it takes to do those things. And if you have questions and you're a political campaign, work with DDC. They have resources on their site. They're always available for a call, for giving a training, if there's an opportunity for that. So you've got the products and tools, and then you do have this wonderful organization there to provide that support should you need it.
And I would just add that if you come to us, you're going to get access to some of the best security technology in the world, right? That's what we try to bring to campaigns in a really simple way. And I mean, we have 3 here, but we have others that we work with as well. And it's really to take out the friction, to make it a shortcut, to take as little time as possible, right, to get campaigns secure so they can keep about their regular business. And that's really, that's the message that campaigns, it doesn't take a lot, but you just have to do it. You just have to do it. So we've run out of time. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for this, and I know you're around here, for a little while. If anybody has any specific questions, any campaigns in the room have any issues, just let us know. We're happy to get you started and get you going. So thank you.
Thank you.
We have one last panel coming up. I believe they'll be here in a second.
Sure. Oh, yes, please.
The obligatory wedding shot.
Ooh, sorry. I wasn't sure which one we were doing either.
had 9 Roberts at the same time, so there was nothing left. There was Robert. To your point, so they said, "I will call him by his middle name."
It's a Todd.
Todd.
Yeah.
There you go. I wish it was a cooler story.
I forgot our title.
Named after Robert Morris, like revolutionary financier.
Yes.
Okay, let me find it.
One of the craziest political stories ever is about.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, good.
Was in prison for debt.
We good?
after he
Hi,
financed
guys.
most of the
Hello, welcome. We're here to talk to you about the preparation for the impact of, drum roll please, AI on the public, political, and nonprofit organizations. This is clearly a subject that it will impact everyone. I had a recent speaking engagement at Berry College up in Rome, Georgia, and one of the students said, "Can I just move into an area where there's no AI?" It's not a thing, kids, sorry. So we have to find ways to prepare for it. So I'm really pleased to present this panel to you. And first and foremost, I'll let them go through and introduce themselves. Okay.
My name's Kane Miller. I'm the executive director of an organization called DigiDems, which works to help Democratic campaigns better leverage available technologies to run more efficient, effective, and secure programs. We embed full-time technologists on critical federal races across the country every 2 years. We also have a full-time cybersecurity program that since 2018 has helped to secure over 1,000 different individuals in the Democratic campaign ecosystem. And I'm excited to be here. I'm part of a very short list of professional Democrats from Forsyth County, Georgia, but very excited to be here representing. Yeah.
Thank you. Sally.
Hi, I'm Sally Wright, and I'm a CIO and executive counselor for Infotech Research Group. In my current role, I have the most amazing job, okay? Nobody reports to me. Hey. After years and years and years of being a CIO and having huge groups of people, now all I do is help other people mature their IT organizations and help them with their next chapters. And this is a dream job, I'm just telling you. And before that, I was the CIO for Fulton County Government. I was the CIO for Georgia State University and a lot of others. Been in the field about 1,000 years, and I'm also a cybersecurity person.
So glad to have you. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank
so
you.
I'm Bobby Sapro. I'm the president of RMS Strategies. It's a political consulting firm. What most people seem to recognize me for is I ran Governor Brian Kemp's re-election campaign this last go-round. So I look forward to talking about how we use technology and AI on that campaign to get an edge and an advantage to beat Stacey Abrams.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Todd Jones. I'm a member of the legislature in the House. I represent South Forsyth County and North Fulton County. I believe the invitation was because my title is I'm the chairman of technology and innovation at the General Assembly. That's what I do as my passion in terms of my business. I was in computers before I guess it was cool. My first coding was on a punch card, COBOL, JCL, and DB2. I see a couple people nodding and actually saying, yes, I was there. And since then, over the last 2 decades, I've been fortunate enough to be able to do things that are kind of do good, do well in renewable energy, climate change, K-12 education, worker safety, and eventually in criminal justice reform. So very nice to meet you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have a few questions that we want to ask the panel that I figured you guys would want to know all about. So I'll start with those questions, and then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. So just to set the stage, what would you say is the current adoption of AI when it comes to political, public, nonprofit kind of organizations? Are we seeing quick adoption, kind of like in the private sector and with businesses, or is it a little steadier? Is it different? How would you paint that picture?
I'll start. I think thinking about Democratic campaigns, which is where I've spent the last 15 years working, I would characterize it as folks are very curious, very interested in AI, as much as sort of misinformation, disinformation was the big sort of buzz topic in 2022. In 2024, what we're seeing is a lot of folks very interested in, I'm hearing a lot about AI. I feel like I should be doing something about this on my campaign, but I don't really know what that means, or maybe I'm afraid of it, or I don't understand it, but I don't want to get left behind. I don't want to lose because of it, et cetera. So I would say on the Democratic campaign side and Democratic organizations, there's a curiosity, there's an interest in looking at these tools, but there is maybe a little bit of reluctance and hesitance of campaigns, very much in the public eye, very much running on a short runway with a limited amount of time to operate, not wanting to be seen as the first one to go diving in and maybe do something that you don't mean to do or make some sort of mistake. So I think there's a lot of waiting to see about, what's the playbook? What can we expect to do with these tools? What's real about these tools and how can we put them to work? At DigiDems, we're working on helping to kind of bridge that gap for campaigns this year. We run a program where we recruit full-time technologists to go to work directly on political campaigns and help them leverage those tools. And we're working this year to make sure that those technologists that we send out to campaigns are fully up to speed on the current state of play and landscape with what are the available tools, which make sense for campaign use cases, which might be snake oil or overblown, which ones might not be safe for me to use to make sure campaigns can make the most of it. But I think, generally speaking, just sort of curious but a little bit hesitant.
Yeah. Right, and maybe a sprinkle of fear, not wanting to go first, but also the fear of missing out and being last.
Certainly.
Okay, quite a complex web. What about the rest of y'all? What do you think?
I'll step in.
Sure.
Look, I think that the Republican Party always seems to be behind the Democratic Party in terms of technology and innovation, but I think we're playing catch up. And, if you look at the presidential race, they were using AI in TV commercials for the first time. There's a lot of criticism about that, but it was being used. But how I view AI and the technology is, my job's to win, right? My job's to win a race. And for me, I always have to find an edge, whether that edge is on a persuasion or a micro-targeting audience, if it's a fundraising audience, and how campaigns are now integrating AI is really spectacular. The perfect example, and there's a guy sitting in the back, Colin, who worked with me on this. We did voter persuasion in Georgia, and it was a big part of our campaign. We got a lot of good press about it. We integrated AI, so we had a paid voter contact program, we had polling, we had modeling, and we integrated AI to find the best way to talk to voters. So in a traditional standpoint, and Kay knows about this, you usually target a household, because it's hard to go into a household and figure out if there's 4 people in a house, how they will all vote. With AI technology, we were actually able to micro-target a household and go specifically at each person in the household. It's a new technology. It was something that we used that I think a lot of people were suspect of at first, and we gave it a shot in the primary, and the data we had after the primary had Governor Kemp about 73% when we used it. No public poll had him above 62, 63%. So it shows that the technology that we use actually when it was integrated was very successful and very accurate. So for me, the way we integrated on that specific campaign was the data side and the persuasion side that we used to get more authentic and real numbers in real time that we were then able to translate into a general election, which was very successful for us.
Got it. Very nice. Yeah, that sounds like some of what businesses are doing as well, as far as personalization and getting down to the micro targeting, household level, even individual level, to be able to really understand what's in their mindset. There's actually talk about, mind reading and mind control, which is a little intimidating.
I don't know about that.
To think about, yeah. It's a little intimidating. We get deeper and deeper, but that's sort of the next logical progression.
Sure.
So your examples include things like really understanding people down to the micro level and creating messaging that's more effective, that creates a lift as a strategic advantage.
Right. I mean, for a political campaign, you only have so many dollars to spend. So how to figure out how to spend those dollars to get the best bang for your buck is really the name of the game. And I think that we use this technology to better go after voters, whether it's through digital or mail. It could be texting. It could be whatever it might. There's a lot of different avenues that we use to target voters.
Yeah.
That it was a huge payoff for us. But again, we were probably one of the first Republican statewide campaigns that use this technology. But I think you're seeing a shift where people are now using it more and more and more. So I think there's a comfort, a comfort level that's growing
Got it.
on the political side of things.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
What are some other use cases or examples?
So I would like to say that the very first place you have to start for using AI of any kind, including your own use, which it's great for generating letters and all kinds of neat stuff, but is to understand the governance of the technology that you're using and understand it now, because all the vendors are embedding AI into their technologies. Recently, I wrote a letter. I was trying to generate a memo of understanding. I did it with ChatGPT 3.5. I sent it to a colleague and said, can you add some stuff to it? She did. She sent it back, and the company had put Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, on my computer. And all of a sudden it pops up and it says, would you like me to make that look professional? And I'm like, yep.
Yes, I would.
But then when I sent it back to my colleague, she said, she was very upset. She said, you left out all the things that I put in there. And I said, I didn't do it. Microsoft Copilot did. So it's really important to think about that. As far as industries and as far as government, I support both in my role. And most everybody, not everybody, but most everybody is still at that very beginning scared stage. So dealing with what the vendors are doing and making sure that the understanding of not letting your data out, if you put your resume in ChatGPT, now your entire resume is out in this huge database. Do you want that? I don't know, do you? So you need to think about what it means and where your data's going, because everybody else is going to use ChatGPT and they'll pull from your resume. It's very important to know that. Most of the clients that are in industry are starting proof of concepts, have started to define their use cases. On the government side, at the local, even state level, they're inching in, but they're not jumping in. They're being cautious.
Okay, so where you're seeing is people are somewhat comfortable with things that are integrated within their technology and their software, and maybe they're okay using those sorts of things.
Not necessarily, because they don't know where their data is being distributed.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, so they have to pay attention to that
So move
too.
with caution.
Yeah. All right, excellent. Anything you want to add, Todd?
The only thing I'd add is I think there's something to be said about using AI for effective communications with your constituents. I have a segment that is Hispanic. I have a segment that is Mandarin. We're going to be starting using AI to basically make those comms happen, but we're going to disclose. So it's going to say Todd Jones on the right, and we used AI to basically allow me to be, fluent in certain languages that frankly I'm not. And I think it's really important. I respect what Bobby and Kane are doing in terms of the campaigns, but our responsibility is to communicate, and we think that AI has a really important role to be able to play there. I think the second thing, and I'll just add this just on what the government's role is, or what it is or what it's not. Look, guys, we have agencies in this state that aren't on the cloud. So if you want to know how far they are with AI, start answering that first question, and then we'll get to the second question. If you're going to talk about government using AI right now, what you see is really the universities. So if you want to consider, and I'm talking about the public universities, I won't speak for Emory and others, but on the public university side, Georgia Tech and others, of course, are really kind of way along in terms of the large language models and things like that. So for us, those are the things that we're going to be looking for. We're actually going to be doing an inventory of the way that how government uses AI over the summer. That should be really interesting and fun. We'll put you all back together and we'll get you the cure for insomnia, okay?
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to double tap a little bit on the point about data security and privacy and those things. One thing that we tell campaigns that are thinking about using AI tools this year, number one is you should, right? You should try these things out. You should get hands-on with them, figure out ways in which they can help you be a little bit more productive, a little bit more efficient with your time, and just kind of see what's out there and what might be useful for your program. But number two, you need to always understand the terms of service and the privacy policies of the tools that you are working with. And you need to understand whatever I'm putting into this model, whether it's something as simple as having it help me to write an email, or if you start getting into some of these emerging technologies looking at data analysis and different things to help you make resource allocation decisions, it's really important you understand how the tool is then going to be able to retain that information and use that information, either to train the models that they have themselves, or to kind of the theme we've been talking about all day today, even if they're not going to be using your data to train their models, you're certainly then putting a lot of your proprietary data in the hands of a vendor that then could be subject to breach, right? And you don't know what their cybersecurity policies and hygiene are like, and so then you might be in a situation where you might have sensitive voter data, sensitive donor and volunteer data that all of a sudden could become publicly available without your knowledge. And we just, typically try to remind campaigns over and over and over again, if a product that you are using is free, you are the product. And you need to understand what that means about how they're going to be using and leveraging the inputs you're putting into it, particularly if you're not paying for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you were to, because what I'm hearing from you guys is a little bit of hesitation, that nobody's just jumping in and going full force. So help us understand, what are some of these barriers and challenges? And you hinted around about some privacy issues and things like that. What are some of the top barriers that you see that could potentially get moved or modified or adjusted to make way for more AI?
From an industry perspective, it is intellectual property. So I will go into an organization and ask a group of executives, are you using AI? And I was doing this like a year and a half, 2 years ago. And they'd all say, absolutely not. We're not doing that. And as soon as the executive left, they all exited. The worker bees are like, yeah, we are. This is what we're doing with it, and this is what we're doing, and this is what we're doing with it. So getting them on the same page, but understanding if your data is going to be out there, where out there means is absolutely imperative.
Do you think some of it, Sally, could be that there needs to be a consistent definition even within a company? Because the executives may not have seen what the worker bees were doing as AI. They may not have even been on the same page with that.
So bringing the executive leadership, whether it's government or whether it's industry, up to speed on what AI is, what generative AI is, what is regular old AI that's been around for 1,000 years, it's absolutely imperative to educate. But you as individuals need to be educated as well on what does it mean to me? Because I know I have to write a letter to tell somebody they need to pay their SIM membership, they're behind, and I'd dread it, and I'd sit there and I'd wait and I'd wait and I'd wait, I don't want to do this. If I tell ChatGPT to do it, in 2 seconds I got my letter,
Yeah.
So I love that part. But
yeah.
What I do for a living is try to communicate to people in masses, right? And I'm young, I'm a millennial, I don't consider myself tech savvy. I'm just not. I pretend to be, I try to be, but I'm not. I think the part that's going to be tough is explaining to people what AI is. I think that y'all in this room are smart and you understand the technology and what's happening, but when you go and talk to, a grandma or like a parent who still is trying to figure out how to use an iPhone, having the conversation and being very transparent about what this is and how it works is going to be the first step, in my opinion, of how we're going to proceed along.
Yep.
I think if you do it on a campaign or in a business, like it's a different conversation, but on a wide scale, it's getting the older generations to understand what this product does. How does this help you in your day-to-day life? And I think when you sit on a panel or you sit in a room like this and y'all are here to listen to us talk about technology, that seems like it's pretty straightforward. But general, very easy technology conversations with general public is a difficult conversation to have, period. So when we, for instance, on the Kemp campaign, you would know this, but you have the QR codes and you'd go up to like a 60, 65-year-old lady, and it's like, oh yeah, if you just scan your phone on the QR code, you can get all of our information. They look at you like you're talking a different language. Right. You know what I mean? And so I think it's just a learning process of getting people familiar with it and understanding it to get that comfort level up so people start trusting it more. Is what I see as the hurdle.
Well, we talked about data literacy a couple of decades ago. Now I feel like we're becoming the age of AI literacy, the education, the advocacy, just what it is and what it is not. What are some of the other barriers that you might see with implementing AI, really pulling it in?
I know a challenge that campaigns have to think about is, there's significant reputational risk to using new kind of untested, unproven tools, right? And if you're an organization that's leveraging AI tools and you've not done the work to sit down and build out your organizational usage policies for here's how we're going to use these tools, here's how we will double check them, here's how we'll make sure we're not, sacrificing quality for speed of being able to do some of these things. How we're going to account for the fact that AI routinely hallucinates things that are wholly untrue, but it is convinced are true, and we'll make a very convincing argument to it that yes, indeed, it is true. Recognizing that large language models are inherently biased, right? Based on whatever it is that you have used to train that model is going to have biases built into it that could manifest in different ways that could be problematic and challenging for you as a campaign who's communicating to the public, right? So there's a lot of that type of reputational risk at play, which I think is one of the things that keeps some folks on the campaign side a little bit reluctant of, again, I don't want to be the first one to do this because then when something blows up, I don't want to be the one with smoke in my face, right? I want to learn from whoever makes the first sets of mistakes with it so I don't have to make those mistakes. I think getting people to that point is going to be helpful, but also overall, and this is going to sound silly, right? But the cultural connotations of AI that we've had for the last 20, 30 years has been almost entirely negative, right? Like, if I'm being honest, probably the first time I heard of the concept of AI was probably in the Terminator movies, right? And that's not a good place to be starting to think about something that's trustworthy and helpful that you should be
He was good in
using.
Terminator 2.
Yeah, there we go. That's true. That's true. But so I think it's just going to take time for people to get comfortable with it and get comfortable with the safeguards you need to put in place organizationally to account for the risks.
Okay. So
yeah, I think Kane, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think he's spot on. Our biggest issue right now is what to believe and what not to believe. The failure of the fourth branch of government, the mainstream media, no matter how it is you want to cloak it, the fact of the matter is a vast majority of Americans do not trust it anymore, and it was always built as the idea that it was going to be effectively the check and balance against the three branches of government, and it has lost its way there. So effectively what you see now is when you have these AI videos being generated and basically the comms that Bobby is talking about and Kane is talking about, at the end of the day, we have a skeptical audience on whether or not that is true or whether or not it's not true. So you start thinking about, do you lean into it from a productivity standpoint? Yeah, sure, lean into it from a productivity standpoint, but in terms of the generation of campaign content, or may it just be communications, you got to be saying to yourself, is that something that's going to be accepted by the consumer of that information, or is it going to be something that's just going to be completely wiped out and basically deleted? So I think we have this struggle in terms of the cultural pushback that we're talking about, but also in just terms of what is real and what is not real, what is true and what is not true.
So I was running through all the use cases for elections for that my company, the research, that's what we do. And the most interesting one that really caught my attention was it's going to be used to eliminate disinformation and misinformation. Because in the 2020 election, my sister got a divorce. She moved in with me. And when she moved in, she's very far right. And she's in Oklahoma, and I'm in Georgia, so I'm going to get both. I'm going to hear both sides. But we would get the exact same article, and one would be heavy right, and one would be heavy left, and I'm going, it's the exact same. So how did you guys do that? You did. You didn't even know. So knowing what to trust.
Yeah. Could I add one thing, though?
Yeah, go ahead.
And for those of you who are just like reading bills, House Bill 986, the second part of it is around this. So we're basically saying, assuming it passes and the governor signs it, in the state of Georgia, it doesn't matter if it's a federal election or a state election. If you're going to use AI, that's fine, but you got to say, Todd Jones for State House, this video created with AI, or this picture created with AI. So we want you to be transparent, so then that way the consumer knows this wasn't an actual event. You didn't really do X or you didn't really do Y, but rather this is something that's coming to you based on, I'll say, the generosity of AI. So we think that should start helping, because we're thinking eventually there's going to have to be a good housekeeping seal on top of anything that's AI generated. In other words, can I believe it? Maybe UL or maybe good housekeeping. What's going to become, I'll say, the equivalent to that, or the equivalency within the AI space?
Right. It's going to be interesting to see, because we've already started joking at Wavical about is this a real person? Are you real? It's been over a minute. You must be real. What were you going to say, Bobby?
I just, again, I said this earlier, but when you're running a campaign or you're doing something and your goal is to win, you have to find a unique edge, right?
Yes.
So I think being transparent about using AI is important, but if I have a technology that I'm using that I know works and someone else isn't, I don't want to give away my secret sauce, right?
Right.
And so it was something that we didn't talk about in the primary for Kemp, but we talked about after the general election. We told people we were using AI, right? But if you're going to be a dinosaur in a tech age, that's on you. So I also am sitting here, it's like I get the transparency, but it's like, look, if you're not going to get on board and get ahead of the curve, I'm going to take that advantage to win, because that's how I view my role in a campaign and a job. And you know, Kane, I'm sure you probably agree with that, but it's like we're always looking for an edge. And I think this is the new edge that if you get on board with it early, you can get, reap the rewards.
Right.
But at the same token, it was it DeSantis used AI in those ads and got absolutely taken to the coals for using AI in a TV ad. So you got to find the wins and measure it accordingly. But I just think that this is an edge in the campaign space that if you're not using it, that's your loss. But excuse me, we're going to beat you with it.
Well, and that brings up the biggest issue that I think we have on the globe today, which is where is the ethical standard? Where are the thresholds? Where are the definitions? So for sure, I'd call that one of y'all's barriers, because you're saying education, advocacy, culture, but also the ethical lines. I have a colleague that's on one of my panels on Wednesday, and I said, wow, what a really cool picture that you have on LinkedIn. And he said, oh, it's AI. Yeah. And I felt a little bit ripped off that he didn't, like I wanted to know that it was AI generated, or that it was at least enhanced by AI. So it does start to make you wonder, where do we draw that line? And going back to something Kane was mentioning, how do y'all feel about, the government in particular, do you think that there's an extra layer of scrutiny, that you're constantly being watched? Like, for example, if Coca-Cola uses AI for marketing and they accidentally say something wrong to a consumer, or not wrong, just not quite targeted, it doesn't get them to go buy their soda, it's not that big of a deal. They just don't get more revenue. But if you guys in a political world or in a nonprofit world, do you think there's an extra layer of scrutiny where there's you're constantly under a microscope and you're always being watched and asked to defend those kinds of things? Not until just now, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure everyone's had this happen, right? You're talking about something on the phone, and the next thing you know, you're on Instagram and it pops up, you're getting advertised. Like, clearly there's a distrust that you're getting spied on, right? And then there's probably a lot of evidence that shows that it's happening.
Yeah.
When Apple did that commercial where it's like, oh, here's how you do privacy on your phone, or like, block, like they did a whole multi-million-dollar ad campaign on it, right? But I think from a government standpoint, I'm one of these people who's like, the less the government's interfering in my life, the better. And I'm a Republican, so like that's kind of our motto. But I don't know how you are going to be able to regulate AI, or how you're going to be able, and Todd probably knows this better than me, but that's going to start to become a sticky situation moving forward. Is if the government interferes and they start regulating, then what does that look like? How does it change the product? Again, I mean, it's like the wild, wild west of technology right now, but I think that you kind of just have to let it go and work through the kinks and the problems to figure out the right way to regulate it.
Like, we're not sure until we see it.
Right.
Could I comment on that?
Sure.
So we weren't going to touch AI this year. Our feeling was, to Bobby's point, it needs to stay the wild, wild west for a little while, let the free market see what's going to occur. Regulation, all it does is stunt in innovation, and we just didn't want to do that. Unfortunately, Congress actually said something, and they said they might take it up. And then when we saw California looking to take it up, and they did take it up, we wanted to have a counterbalance to California, because we didn't want Congress just to look at what California is doing, because that's typically not going to bode well for Georgia businesses. So we went ahead and we did do an AI bill, and we went ahead and with the understanding that innovation was going to be number one, keeping the free market there is number one. So we ended up getting very, very narrow, and we only did two major bills on AI. The first one's the election bill, which I have referred to. Around the two parts of that bill is just strictly saying, and a very thin piece of folks, in terms of how they cannot use AI to affect an election, a referendum, or the administration of that election. So I'm sure you heard they used Joe Biden's voice to tell people that the election was moved from Tuesday to Wednesday. We can't have that, everyone. My mom, who's in her 80s, she will absolutely believe if Donald Trump or Joe Biden's voice told her it's been changed from Tuesday to Wednesday. She would. And I love my mom to death, but she isn't that type of thinker in terms of what I hear is absolutely what's going to occur. And then the second part of that bill is what I said before in terms of disclosure. The other bill that we did, we felt as if we had a moral obligation. It turns out that child exploitation, these individuals are no longer necessarily always getting I don't know how to say this in a live thing, but I'll just say the juvenile, instead of filming the juvenile, they're scraping the internet to get the photo, and then I'll let your guys' imagination take it from there in terms of what they're using AI for, and then also for elderly exploitation. So we felt as if the criminal statutes needed to get closed up to make sure that that type of exploitation of our children and of our elderly was not occurring. But we are going to take it, to Bobby's point, in a very step-by-step basis. We don't want to be transformational on it to stunt the innovation that you guys are doing, but at the same time, we have to protect those that need protection, and then at the same time, make sure that the information you get, because you hear all about election integrity constantly since the 2020 election. Well, the greatest election in integrity would be, do you know what your candidates are actually saying and believing? If you don't know that, it doesn't matter if we use paper ballots or machines. What matters is you understand who you're voting for and why you're voting for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to wrap us up, this is a super provocative topic. Like, we could go on forever talking about this and the ethical standards of AI and where it stands. But thinking about the barriers plus all the opportunities, like Bobby had talked about, even to do simple things can have a big impact. Thinking about these opportunities and the barriers and the risks, what would you say is your final one piece of advice for people in this sector, in the public, political, nonprofit organizations? What one piece of advice would you give to say, here's how you can get ready for AI?
Yeah. I would say without fail, campaigns that win run good programs, right? And AI is a tool, it is not a program. And if you were thinking about AI as this sort of kind of world-changing sort of killer app type thing that is going to revolutionize how you do your work, you're thinking about it in the wrong way. You should be thinking of it as a tool that helps you on every single valuable day of time you have as a campaign to communicate with voters to make you 10% more efficient and more effective. And if you're talking to 10% more voters every day, at the end of it, you're going to end up in a better place, right? There is a tendency to do a lot of myth-making around technology in campaigns. I'm a veteran of the 2012 Obama campaign, and there was a lot of hay that got made that year about a couple of competing technological tools with the Obama campaign and the Romney campaign that were going to change everything about campaigns and would decide who was going to win. The Obama campaign had this targeting tool called Narwhal. The Romney campaign had this tool called Orca, because orcas prey on narwhals, get it? And there was incredible amounts of press that were written on these two very specific tools, and a lot of effort got put into in the aftermath of that campaign saying, well, Obama won because of his significant technological edge. He won because of Narwhal and these different things. The 2012 Obama campaign won because they thoroughly out-communicated the Romney campaign at every turn. And they had a number of different tools that helped them to do that. If you want to win, run smart programs and use the best available tools that you have to run those programs as well as you can. That's the right way to think about it.
Okay, so your final advice is learn more and see AI as a tool and not as a whole program. Don't count it. Okay, yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Sally.
So my last bit of advice would be to go look at cisa.gov. It's got all the terms defined, the difference between misinformation and disinformation, and a lot of information about AI and elections. And that's what I would go look. If you haven't played with it, play with it yourself so you get an understanding. And it's not just old people that need help understanding, it's everybody, even though we've had a lot of focus on ageism over here. I guess I'm a little sensitive, I'm getting up there.
Yeah. So enhance your AI literacy.
Enhance your AI literacy and go look at that document.
Love it, thank you. Yeah, Bobby?
I would say adapt or die. I'm risk adverse. Take a chance, try to understand it to the best of your ability. And if there's something out there that helps your business or whatever it is that you're doing, a campaign or a nonprofit organization, take the risk, take the gamble, and see how it works for you. But with the understanding that it might not go the way you want, it might be complicated. So just
put your toe in the pool, like do a proof of concept.
Yeah, I'm gonna dive in and see how it goes.
Good for you. Good for you.
Kind of thing.
Awesome. Yeah, Todd.
Mine is just a Staples easy button. I think at the end of the day, we need to figure out a way to make it easy.
Yeah.
So just a Staples easy button.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you guys so much. I know we're over time, Erica, but do we have time for Q&A or no?
I got to get to the Capitol.
I guess 5 minutes, if y'all are okay with that. 5 minutes. Who do we? Yeah.
So a lot has been talked about generalized cybersecurity threats using multi-factor authentication. What would you say is unique or of the greatest concern in the election space?
Are you talking about on the cybersecurity front, or just generally?
Well, technology, AI, security, that whole things we're talking about today.
It's a very open-ended question. I think right now, if I'm, and Kane, feel free or anyone to jump in, from my perspective there's a lot of misinformation, and I think that, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat. I mean, you talk about the articles or whatever it might be. I don't watch the news anymore because half the time I think it's scripted or it's pushing one thing or another. I think the biggest problem I see in campaigns is that most voters aren't actually educated on the issues at hand. And that might not be just specifically on cybersecurity, but how, you talked about this, but it's like if they hear Donald Trump's voice or Joe Biden's voice, or they read something on the internet, they just believe it to be fact.
Right.
So going back to communicating to voters, it's a campaign's job, or whatever organization's job, to over communicate and make sure you're getting the right message across to voters, or elected.
Look,
whatever.
It's going to be used as a sword in this election. If I could go to Vegas and put $10,000 down, I would. It's going to be used as a sword. If you haven't, Google Turkey's election, the presidential election. There was a fake AI video made on one of the candidates basically soliciting a prostitute. And at the end of the day, that sunk his candidacy. And we are going to see things over the next 6-7 months where we're going to be asking ourselves, did it really happen? And that's what I'm talking about. At this point, it's three-dimensional and we don't know if it really happened yet, and if it's true. And if we don't know that, fundamental issue of whether or not what that candidate said or what that candidate did or what they believe in and what they're speaking to, we fundamentally start looking at our republic and our democracy in a completely different way. How are we going to ensure, maybe from the top of the ticket at the presidency all the way down to the most local city council, how are we going to ensure what that candidate believes?
Yep, I think it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I was going to say knowing what's real is probably the biggest technological challenge that we're going to face in the near future, just knowing what is real. And we already have issues with that just because the media filters. But now, I was watching a movie, I can't remember which one it was, and it said, oh, we caught him. We caught him on video. And I thought, you're not going to be able to say that in 10 years. You can't even say that now, right? So I think knowing what's real.
I think if I can just add from the cybersecurity standpoint, because I know it's been a big topic today, the biggest concern I have in 2024 is, quite frankly, just complacency. We've been fortunate in 2018 and 2020, 2022. We did not see the types of big public breaches that we saw in 2016, right? That arguably may have swung the outcome of that election with John Podesta's emails getting leaked, right? In the immediate aftermath of that, it was very easy to sit down with a candidate or campaign staff and say, you don't want that to happen to you. Let me sit down with you for half an hour and I'm going to walk you through how to secure your accounts and teach you some basic kind of best practices to keep you from having to deal with that, right? And as we've gotten further and further away from 2016, which now feels like a million years ago, in some ways we're concerned that while awareness of cybersecurity has increased, the urgency in many ways has diminished for a lot of folks. And it just takes one mistake. It just takes clicking on one bad email when you don't check who the sender was, or you don't look at the toolbar to see the address that it sent you to, where you can make some really big mistakes really quickly if you've not taken some steps to secure yourself. So all the recommendations from today, if you're working in this space, I cannot implore you enough, take the time to sit down and do these things. You will never regret it.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
go this way.
Everybody for coming. I want to thank Google. I want to thank the Google Civics team.